You're watching KPTS, Channel 8.
Production and broadcast costs for Sedgwick County Commission meetings have been underwritten by Sedgwick County. KPTS welcomes comments from the public on its broadcast of the County Commission hearings. Viewers are invited to write to County Commission Broadcast, KPTS, 320 West 21st Street, Wichita, Kansas 67203.
Good morning. I'm Christy Zukovich. Welcome to the January 6th Sedgwick County Commission meeting. We are glad you're joining us today. Of course, we use this time to let you know about events and activities going on around Sedgwick County. And first, we'd let you know that Intrust Bank Arena is very busy because it's Thunder hockey time. And, of course, they will be in action on the 8th and the 12th. We will also have Monster Jam on the 15th and 16th. And then, of course, a little PBR, little rodeo, bull riding on the January 30th. Commissioners, we'd also remind you that it's Winter Wednesdays out at the Sedgwick County Zoo, and that means every Wednesday through February. It's just $2.50 admission. And Commissioners, with it being as cold as it is, the question I have for you is, do you think they're running around to keep warm, or do you think they're just hibernating and snuggling all up? Which would you do? So anyway, a good thing to go out and check out the zoo and see what the animals are doing, and always get your exercise steps in for those of you who have New Year's resolutions. The zoo is a great place to get that in. Also, on today's agenda, we do have a full meeting room today. We do have a planning agenda item about an events center. We have an agreement with the Health Department for Project Access, and we'll have a review of a service plan for a Derby annexation. But Commissioners, I'd also remind you that this evening we will be hosting in the jury room with our South Central Legislative Delegation the forum for the community to come forward, and that begins at 7 o'clock, again in our jury room here at the courthouse. And a little plug and reminder that even though the Shockers are playing, you can still come and keep track of the score on Twitter. So, see, trying to support our Shockers, but support our delegation as well. So that's all I have for this morning. Chairman Ranzau, I bet you can get this meeting underway.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Christy. With that, I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Sedgwick County Commissioners for January 6, 2016. Madam Clerk, first item, please.
Invocation to be led by Pastor Dave Fulton, St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Please remain standing for the flag salute.
Shall we pray?
Gracious God, we come before you for a pause, for a moment to set aside agendas, projects, issues, to be present to you. We come before you with a psalm. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord in gladness. Come into his presence with singing. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. We are thankful, O Lord our God, not in the words of Abraham Heschel, not for how things are, but that they are. The gift of life fills us with wonder. We give you thanks for this moment in which we celebrate the very gift of life. We share in this chamber the gift of public service, especially service with and for the members of our community, Sedgwick County. We ask you, O Holy One, to be present in this meeting with our public officials, elected and selected, to work for the common good. Grant them a vision of the whole, vision of peace, of well-being shared by all in Sedgwick County. Grant us a share of your compassion as decisions are made on behalf of the vulnerable in our home on the range. Lord, make us instruments of your peace as we pray in the name of all that we hold sacred, and all God's people say, Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor, for being here today. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner Unruh.
Present.
Commissioner Norton.
Present.
Commissioner Howell.
Present.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Present.
Chairman Ransoff.
Present. Next item.
Public agenda.
We don't have anyone signed up except for the hearing. Is that correct?
That is correct,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Next item.
Appointments. Item A. Approve the resignation of WILLA DECASTRO from the Sedgwick County Advisory Council on Aging.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Yost, County Councilor. Item A, as stated, is the resignation of the Honorable WILLA DeCastro as a member of the Advisory Council on Aging. She was Commissioner PETERJOHN'S appointment, and she felt the need to resign, and I would urge that the Commission approve her resignation.
Commissioners, what's Commissioner Peterjohn?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Former State Representative WILLA DeCastro has a long record of public service, and I very much appreciate her willingness to serve on our Aging Advisory Council. And I'm going to make the motion that we accept this resignation, and also add to have the chairman sign a letter to express our appreciation for her service to this board and to Sedgwick County.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Chairman Ransoff.
Aye. Next item, please.
Item B. PUD 2015-00006. County Planned Unit Development Zoning Request on GC General Commercial and SF-20 Single Family Residential Zoned Property, generally located north of U.S. Highway 54 on the east side of 135th Street West.
Dale Miller, Planning Staff. Good morning, Commissioners. This is a request, as indicated, for a planned unit development zoning that would permit what we collectively call an event center. The individual uses would include outdoor recreation and entertainment. The event center itself would permit weddings, family reunions, and other life cycle events like birthdays and retirements and business meetings as well. They also want the ability to serve alcohol depending on the event. And as part of the PUD, they would also be granted uses permitted in the GC General Commercial District except for a list of specifically prohibited uses such as dog kennels, sexually oriented businesses, correctional placement residents, those sorts of things. There's kind of a standard list of uses that many applicants voluntarily delete from the list of permitted uses in the GC district, and they have done so. They are also requesting the ability to provide live music and food service up to a maximum of 350 patrons. And the application area is shown here inside the outlined area. It is located on the east side of 135th Street. It does have a little bit of frontage on Highway 54 there on the south end. There's a driveway that connects to West Harry Drive and then goes north to the larger property. There's also an access point to 135th here on the west. The colors on the zoning map here, the pink outline the area that is currently zoned GC General Commercial. The beige color is SF20, Single Family 20. The white is Single Family 5. And all of the white area is located in the city of Wichita, as is some of the GC, the pink area as well. There's an aerial showing how it is today. It's developed currently with two metal type buildings that, from the viewing it from the road, it appears that it was most recently a church. I remember it a number of years ago as the Diamond W Horse Arena as well, so it's had a variety of uses in its past. There is vacant ground to the south. There's a smaller commercial establishment here in the southwest corner. There are self-storage units here to the southeast. I believe there is an antique store here also to the southeast. And then you can see to the east of the application area is a large area. There are a few buildings here. Not sure what those buildings are, but primarily this area to the north and east is vacant. There's significant floodplain that runs through at least a portion of this. To the north are subdivisions that are part of the Auburn Hills subdivision, wraps then across 135th and around and down to the clubhouse area of Auburn Hills that's here to the northwest. There are two large lot homes here on the properties to the west. This area appears to be vacant as far as I can tell from the view of the road, and then there's a church here on the northwest corner of 135th and Kellogg. When this case went to Planning Commission, there were a number of folks that were present and protested, and the property owners, the land area of the property owners that submitted protest equaled this 57.55% protest. Primarily, their concerns had to do with traffic volume, noise, potential unruly behavior that might come with service of alcohol, and then, in their opinion, the proposed use could potentially negatively impact their property values. As proposed, the event center would be open from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning on Fridays and Saturdays, and from 8 a.m. to midnight Sunday through Thursday. They're proposing to expand this pond that's located in the northeast corner of the property to a larger area, and that would be the outdoor recreation entertainment activity for swimming and other aquatic events. That particular area is proposed to have hours of 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. The outdoor music or live music groups are restricted to a 50-foot radius around the event center, the existing buildings there, and the outdoor speakers are allowed between 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. only between April 1st and September 30. All outdoor music is supposed to be restricted to a volume that cannot be heard on neighboring properties. Here is the site plan that they submitted. Gives a little clearer view of the pond as it exists today, and then the dashed area showing the proposed extension of that pond, the outdoor seating area, the outdoor concession area, expanded outdoor recreation area, parking to the northwest and to the south, or straight west, and then outdoor seating and so forth to the south. gives a better view of how they propose to develop the site. The site currently has an advanced on-site wastewater disposal system and on-site water wells. And this is the site looking at it from 135th. This is the area to the north. South of the site, I believe this is the commercial building that's in the little notch, the southwest corner that's notched out of the application area. Then these would be the self-service units and other commercial activities that would be to the southeast of the application area. One of the homes on the west side of 135th, other homes on the west side. I'll go back to the site plan. When the Planning Commission heard this, they ultimately approved the request as it was submitted. However, they did make some modifications that in the event that the property would ever be annexed by the City of Wichita, they would comply with the City of Wichita noise ordinance. Parking is to be calculated at 1 parking space per 4 occupancy, which would result in a need, if they had a maximum of 350 people on the site, of 88 spaces. The parking area per county regulations would be allowed to be gravel. They would also be required to submit a landscape plan with berms that would be located along the north and west property line. Now, at the Planning Commission meeting, they did not indicate the height of the berms or the screening. They just indicated that there was to be berming and screening, and so that was left unspecified. So if you want to firm that up in the event that you would approve this, that would be something you could do with this hearing. With that, I think that's kind of the Cliff Notes version of the application. Obviously, there are a number of people here to speak, and so I try and answer questions or let you move on in the hearing.
Commissioners, are there any questions for Dale at this time? Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question would be, can you tell me how many people are in the protest area that constitutes the 57.55%?
How many people?
How many people does that is it just like 1 or 2 or 3, 10? How many landowners are there that actually protested in that area that creates the 57.55% protest? Do we know that?
Let's see. This area there is all owned by one person or a series of trusts. They're controlled by one person. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'm estimating.
6. All right. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions for Dale? Okay. At this point, we'll allow public comment on this. We have a number of people. Generally, we'll let the people who protest this go first, and we'll give you 3 minutes to speak, and then we'll have the agent of the landowner, if they want to speak afterwards. So, first is Jim Edgington.
Excuse me. Thank you. My name is Jim Edgington. I reside at 806 North Beebe, Wichita. I own the property, the vacant lot at 1441 South 135th Street. After leaving the Planning Commission meeting on this property, I was under the impression that the cutoff time would be 8 o'clock on weekdays and 10 o'clock on weekends. There would be noise restricting berms on the west and north boundaries with landscaping and a paved parking area. The presenter for the people that are wanting to do this looked directly at the applicants for their approval on those such items several times, but is now my understanding that under the county codes, these are just suggestive measures and applicants would not be under any restrictions to follow the Planning Commission's suggestions. If these applicants do not follow through with their plans to build such a site, it's Katie bar the doors for the next group of investors, the homeowners, and I feel. From the southern border of Dillon's at Maple and the golf course, I'm only aware of one small area that possibly has children on it, which would be, I think, the area right north of, I don't remember the, Stoneleigh. There possibly might children, but I think Stoneleigh is mainly 55 and up community, and I believe the Auburn Hills court, they are 55 and up also, and I do know of another project that is under development that would be 55 and up. So from there all the way south to Kellogg, there are no children now, or younger people. Now imagine, if you will, 70 degrees, crisp, clean air, 5 Harleys at peak horsepower with open pipes. You can hear them from a mile away. Being a gearhead myself, I love that sound. Illegal, but unenforced because of the lack of the WPD and no security being necessary under the county code provisions. Blasting from a standing start, grabbing 6 gears, a quarter mile in either direction. Now imagine it being 1:30 a.m. in a parking lot of an establishment that has been serving alcohol all evening. The only thing I fear worse than that would be having teenage children and getting a telephone call at 1:30 in the morning. I, gentlemen, would be one pissed off gearhead. My opinion is that this land should be left residential or annexed into the city before any zoning changes, so we, the people of 135th Street, have due process to complain about our neighbor's violation of the code enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edgington. Are there any? Commissioner PETERJOHN?
Yes, I just want to point out that my understanding that under city code, the limitations in terms of the distance from the property where you'd be able to have a say is 200 feet. On the county, it's 1,000 feet. So it's a very different situation in terms of where they measure. If you looked at the maps in terms of 200 feet from the proposal as opposed to 1,000, obviously it would significantly reduce the impact area. And obviously for the person who owns the property, I believe it's Ms. Hall, who's immediately to the north and east, that wouldn't change. But for a lot of the other folks who are out here, that would. So I mention that because there are some differences between city and county code, but it may have an impact whether you're a gearhead or not. Appreciate you coming down and speaking this morning.
Okay.
If you have any comments on that, I'd be happy to hear it.
No, I'm fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is John Oborny. And I'll ask each speaker to give your name and address for the record like the first speaker did. Thank you.
Is there a way? I'm not familiar with this.
Just roll the wheel.
Roll the wheel. Oh, okay. That's one I like. That's another one I like. Okay. Thank you. Good morning. My name's John Oborny. I live at 13315 West Hayden Street in Wichita, Kansas, and I'm the president of the 8th Homeowners Association in Auburn Hills. And that area, whoops, I don't know if can I point to it? Oh, it's I'm going to learn. Okay, right here. Oh, okay, but that's that area right there. Okay, and I'm also the president of the Auburn Hills Facility Master Association, which is over 500 homes in the whole Auburn Hills addition, basically everything from my area to 151st Street, okay, and Maple. And so I get in touch with a lot of people. But anyway, golden rule number 1, the proposed change in zoning is not needed. It's not compatible to the current zoning uses or the characteristics of the land around it. The northern half of the proposed zoning change is already zoned for single family. And that is, oh, here we go again, okay. Oh, okay. But anyway, what you're looking at doing is changing the zoning for roughly this area right here from single family into this PUD area, okay? And anyway, the northern half of the proposed zoning change is already zoned for single family. The 2030 Wichita functional land use of the Wichita-Sedgwick County Comprehensive Plan identifies this land as urban residential. The land east, right here, north, and west are all single family, okay? The courtyard development, which is this development right here, and I don't understand why those people weren't in the 200-foot area, but, you know, it's amazing to me. I mean, they're right across the street. But anyway, has been progressing well and is single family. The topography of this area and distance from Kellogg of these 20 acres, which are these 20 acres right here in relationship to the courtyard area, as well as these single family, would basically say that this should remain a single family. Okay? The zoning should stay as it is. Our housing area has been developed for 15 years now. It's a nice, quiet area with little crime. Allowing an entertainment venue to go into this area is not compatible with the surrounding area. Golden rule number 5. The proposed PUD will have a negative impact on the public health, safety, and welfare of our community. With the mixture of alcohol and water around the pond, the potential of EMS and/or fire calls could become a weekly occurrence. Are there even going to be water safety staff to take care of potential drownings? Nothing's in the PUD about that. Okay? No mentions whatsoever. But I guarantee you, if you put a swimming pool in your backyard, there's all kinds of restrictions. Okay? The serving of alcoholic beverages at these events, with no security required by the owners of this property, will be a daily danger to anyone driving on 135th Street after these events finish. We've had one death and several trees hit by cars driving too fast in the curve right there in front of the golf clubhouse. Okay? Our entryway was hit by a car just over a year ago. These were people that weren't drinking. The serving of alcoholic beverages will have a negative effect on the public health, safety, and welfare of the Auburn Hills community. Golden rule number 8. There is tremendous neighborhood opposition to this proposed zoning change. I personally turned in 57 registered protest petitions to the county clerk. Since last Saturday, I have collected another 144 homeowners that have signed a petition against this zoning change. And I don't know, who do I turn this into? County clerk? Are they here? Okay. Turn it right there. And that's just since Saturday. Okay? This PUD is a slap in the face to homeowners in Auburn Hills that pay property taxes. As private homeowners, we have some of the most restrictive ordinances, covenants of anyone in Sedgwick County in an effort to keep our area looking good and safe. Yet, this PUD has hardly any restrictions on noise, security, screening, and parking. And I'd also put in the water safety. Okay? Someone in the city really wants this. This is a bad PUD and should not be passed. The only real golden rule is doing to others as you would have done unto you. I do not believe any one of you would vote this into the neighborhood where you live. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Mike Irving.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Mike Irvin, and I'm at 13307 West Hayden in Auburn Hills in the Enclave, which would be just north of Barbara's property and a little bit to the east, right on hole number 9, if you've played out at the Auburn Hills Golf Course. My concern about this whole condition is I've got a 17-year-old daughter, and I know a lot of her friends. There's a lot of kids that live in that neighborhood that are driving or going to be learning how to drive. Across the street over in the Legends, a lot of kids that are learning how to drive. They come from Eisenhower High School, which is just west about 2 miles. They come down Kellogg. A lot of them work at Dillon's, at Sonic, at the establishments that are in the Auburn Hills district right there for retail sales. And a gentleman had mentioned earlier, nothing's worse than getting a call at 1:30 in the morning because your kid has been involved in an accident or their friend. And we have enough trouble with traffic in that narrow area right now. That's all we're doing is adding fuel to that fire. The kids are still learning how to drive. They're not experienced enough. And to have an influx of people outpouring from an event at 1:30 or at 10:30, and these kids are going home from whatever the conditions were that they were at, I think we're putting them at a big risk that they don't need. And that, again, it doesn't help for any of the safety of the neighborhood. And people wandering around looking and driving, free riding around. We don't need that in the neighborhood. So you wouldn't want it in your neighborhood. We don't want it in ours. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Nancy Eubanks.
My name is Nancy Eubanks. I live at 7926 Meadow Park Court. That's in Reflection Ridge. Several years ago, I stood in front of 4 out of the 5 of you in a request I was representing the Mays School Board. And we were asking for your vote on one of the bull statues located at the Coliseum. The reason I bring this up, because in working through that time with you, I found you to be very easy to work with, and you were concerned about the patrons of this district, whether you're in our district or another one. I'm standing in front of you again to ask you to vote as a no vote for this PUD that would allow this entertainment venue on 135th Street. For you see, my husband and I are now retired, and we're building a patio home in the courtyards. We could have built anywhere in Wichita, but we chose this location for the peacefulness and the seclusion. I found out a few days ago that this could drastically change for our future. As an elected public official, and I know I've been one myself, you have guidelines to follow. I'm referring to the golden rules. In studying these rules, a vote to allow this entertainment venue at this location would easily be broken by at least 4 of these rules, and actually possibly 4 others. The rules that I'm most concerned about are number 3, can this development be good for the existing neighbors? I think you can answer that yourself. And number 7, the impact on the community. It's my understanding that there's very few requirements as far as the sewage, the security, and the hours of operation. You know there are going to be issues. To tell you the truth, I'm surprised that this was even considered for this location. These types of venues are supposed to be the backbone of our Old Town area. Why you would want to develop something of this nature in an area that clearly has the makings for a quiet residential area that would generate so much more tax revenue and benefits to many, many patrons, it's hard for me to understand why you would consider this PUD and the change. In closing, I'm going to ask you to put yourself in my place. You're building what will surely be your last residence. With this in mind, you looked for years for the perfect spot to build that house. You feel that you finally found it. You excitedly work with the builders for that perfect plan, but your excitement quickly turns to questions and concerns about what your future will truly be. Will I get to sit on my front porch and listen to the birds, or will there be loud music, sirens, squealing tires? You will be at the place where my husband and I are at now, one of these days. Would you be concerned? In listening to our prayer, the prayer by Pastor Fulton, I would encourage you to go back and listen to some of those things he said. To me, it is very much a correlation to what we are asking for you to consider. Please vote no on this PUD. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Can I ask a question? You mentioned specifically, I believe you said you had 4 of the golden rules where you think there were problems. You specifically mentioned 3 and 7. I'm going to assume implicitly that you also would have included 8. Issue number 8, which was neighborhood, the opposition of neighborhood residents. Was there a 4th one specifically that you wanted to mention and get on the record?
I didn't bring my list of the golden rules. I believe it was 3, 5, 7, 8. Actually, as I went through all 9 of them, I only could find one that maybe...
Well, hold off while you're away from the microphone. Let me talk so that, since this is being recorded verbatim, I'm going to try and make it easy on the clerk so she can...
Okay,
if you talk away from the podium, it becomes very hard to get the record. But if you want to... I just wanted to try and make sure that I understood the four golden rule points that you were trying to make, and if my assumption that number 8 was not one of them, I wanted to give you a chance to correct me on that. I don't think I'm wrong on that, but if I am, please do so, and let me take it from there, and let me give you an opportunity to respond to my question.
No, the one that has all 9 listed on the front. This one has all 9. It's on the back. You're asking me about number 8?
Well, that was one that I assumed was one of the 4, but you didn't mention it. And I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth here, just for the record. But you did mention four specific points, and you mentioned in the notes I've made here 3 and 7. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to make sure you got all 4 on the record, and I understood exactly the points you were trying to make, Ms. Eubanks.
It would be that one.
It would be 8?
Mm-hmm.
And was there a 4th one?
The only one I felt like really did, I didn't feel like I needed to address was number 4, about the length of time that this has been. But I sat down and I went through these, and it was amazing to me that I felt like almost every one of these could be addressed by any of us here with the negativity towards this venue.
Thank you.
But I knew I had a time limit, so I had to keep it within that time limit.
No, I understand, but if a commissioner asks you a question, we can stretch things out a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Patty McCullough.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Patty McCullough. My wife and I live at 13604 West Verona Court in a new development, the Courtyards at Auburn Hills, which is on the west side of 135th. We are the first house upon entering that addition. In August of 2015, we moved to this area that we considered to be our final home, and we love it. We were more than shocked when we found that the property on the east across 135th and a short distance south was being proposed to change zoning classifications from single family to PUD. The current zoning is compatible with the adjacent property owners. The property under contest is very similar to the home developments which surround the acreage classified as single family, some separated by a pipe fence on the north side and a 135th Street roadway on the west side. The proposed PUD is not compatible with the zoning uses and character of the surrounding neighborhood. The surrounding home additions have attractive entrances and are always maintained, well maintained and well lighted, with planned landscaping and cared for as the property within the development itself. The single-family classification and planned unit development are light years apart as far as requirements. The single-family classification has many restrictions, and that is why people choose to live in those areas rather than the PUD restrictions, which are few, if any. The current zoning classification does in no way eliminate possible sale of this land. The property has great potential of being sold under the current zoning classification, therefore becoming a good neighbor, conforming to the purpose of the original planners visualized. On behalf of the many neighbors, I ask that each of you, commissioners, treat this petition as if it were in your district and vote against the zoning change. There is nothing that logically supports the placing of this PDU zoning classification directly adjacent to a single family zoning classification. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Commissioner Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McCall, I have a couple questions for you, if it's okay. Do I understand that did you have your house built when you moved to that final home, you said? Is this house that you had constructed for yourself?
We contracted it in February of last year and finished it and moved in August.
Okay, and were you one of the first homes to the neighborhood, or one of the last, or how mature was this neighborhood when you moved?
I don't know which number we are, but there are probably 14, 15, 16 people living in that neighborhood now, and we were probably 8th or 9th.
Are some of those lots still waiting for homes to be built, and they're vacant lots right now?
We have 44 lots that are sold or occupied, I believe.
Okay, but how many lots are vacant?
70,
you know?
Well, it'd be 30.
30 lots are still vacant.
30, 31, something. There's 75 lots, I believe.
Can you tell me? Do you know? So was the subject property the one that we're talking about today? Was it in its current state? I guess it's been vacant for a while. Was it vacant when you made a choice to build your home?
No,
it was being utilized at that time. What was the purpose of the structure of the building we're talking about today? We're changing on this PUD today. What was going on in that facility?
Nothing as I was aware of.
It was vacant then?
I understand it was a church ownership, and they had thought about putting in a youth camp, summer youth camp, and so forth. That's my understanding. That was in the lower section. The upper part of it was residential classification.
And so since the church no longer was using this facility, nothing else was there between the time the church was there until now? This has been vacant this whole time?
I assume so.
Okay.
I have no way of knowing actually what they were doing.
All right. I have a question first. I guess I'll ask my question to staff later on. But thank you for your testimony, Mr. McCullough.
Next, we have Kent Owen.
Good morning. My name is Kent Owen. I live 13608 West Verona Court, right next door to Mr. McCullough. My house, as Mr. McCullough's, backs up to 135th Street. This area in question is directly across the street. As Ms. Eubanks stated, most of us are planning this to be our last home. We had no idea that something like this could possibly happen across the street. It was owned by a church. If they wanted to build a church there, that'd be fine. But an outdoor event center like this doesn't really suit very well with what we've got planned for this stage of our lives. That's about all I have to add. I ask for a no vote from all of you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Commissioner PETERJOHN?
Yes, Mr. Owen? Mr. Owen?
Sorry.
Can you help me out? I'm trying to understand exactly where on the map your property would be. If you could you said you were just west on on the other side of 135th. You said you back onto 135th. So you're, okay.
I'm right there.
Okay. No, that's what I needed to know. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have Scott Lanier.
I'm Scott Lanier. I'm with Perfection Builders here in Wichita. I'm 11828 West Central. We are the developers of the courtyards at Auburn Hills, which is west of the south portion of the subject property here. I was kind of hoping Brian would go into some of the technical stuff before me from MKC, but I'm probably going to ditch a little bit of what I had planned to say, and in sitting here and listening to the comments so far, I feel that the nature of the neighborhood, the description of this area hasn't been fully represented accurately. It was discussed, the commercial ground along Kellogg and just north of Kellogg on 135th, and no mention of our courtyards project. Really, the commercial land on Kellogg is so far removed. Once you turn north on 135th and go a short distance, it immediately turns into a residential neighborhood once you get past the paint store. There are no commercial characteristics to that stretch there. We've gone to great lengths to develop properties that are peaceful, secure for our clients. And you've heard from a couple of them today. Right across the street, our entrance to the courtyards area, there's $250,000 worth of landscaping alone just to enter that neighborhood. Right behind the entrance, there's a $500,000 clubhouse. It's got a fitness center. It's got a heated pool. All the maintenance is provided. It's what people want. That's probably the fastest selling area in Wichita right now, new home area. 70, help me out, Jason. This is my partner, Jason Ronk. 78 lots. I don't have an exact count, but at least half of those are sold right now. The number of residents in there, gosh, there's got to be 30 rooftops in there by now, under construction, and I mean we've got probably a dozen starts right now. But my point is this whole neighborhood is a residential neighborhood. We've got a handful of potential clients right now that are ready to buy, and they heard about this PUD issue, and now they're waiting to see what happens. The land across the street, I know some of that's zoned general commercial right now, and just because a property is zoned commercial, in my mind, doesn't doesn't mean it has commercial value or is viable commercially. I'll be up front. We've made 2 offers to purchase that ground to develop into another area similar to our courtyards area, and we haven't gotten responses from the sellers yet. Be that as it may, we find that a very attractive residential piece of property. Commercially, what's going on with this PUD would be devastating to any further residential development in that neighborhood. And going through your golden rules, I can only think of one that this does not violate, and that's number 9 on your list. I feel as though converting that single-family zoning to a commercial zoning right now would be a violation of public trust, to be quite honest, to be the breaking of a public contract, because our residents love to look at that beautiful land. I know it's pretty over there, and it's been zoned single family. Further to the south has been the large horse arena that's no longer in use and was intended to be a church. And now I guess, what was I going to say? I'm sorry. Yeah, now I guess if it's zoned PUD, I know we're talking about an event center now, but according to the reports I read, it's pretty wide open zoning, and I don't think it would be a stretch to imagine that if it is an event center, it'll be a short-lived event center, and then something else will go in 5 or 10 years later, and it's going to continue to be a struggling commercial property. Yeah, I think in considering the request and going through the 9 golden rules, that it walks all over those rules. It has no regard for them whatsoever. And I would ask all of you guys to keep that in mind when you vote today on this. Access to Kellogg. Yeah, the traffic would greatly increase in that area. And if you haven't been down that stretch, a couple of guys mentioned the curves. It's a residential stretch there, and I've been told by multiple parties that KDOT has condemned any access to Kellogg. They're planning an interchange there, and the only way to access that commercial property is off of 135th Street. That's one thing I felt that needed to be brought up. And the comprehensive plan, I think, was recently adopted that confirmed the residential use of that property. So that's all I have to say. I appreciate it. I didn't mean to ramble.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
And Commissioner Peterjohn just have a question.
Yes, I do want to get a question.
You bet.
And let me make sure I'm pronouncing. Mr. Lehner?
Lehner. Yes, sir.
Lehner. Okay, sorry, get your name straight. You mentioned you've got a number of lots that you're in the process of trying to market at this point in time. Can you point those out on the map, or give me an idea, basically where the bulk or most of those are physically located?
Okay. Do you see the north boundary of the proposed PD? Right. Go straight west across the street in that development. I don't know why the whole thing's not blue, but everyone in there. I haven't talked to a single resident that's not against this proposed zoning, but that's the area. There's 78 lots in there, sir. Okay. And I think right now we're down to 30-some lots still available.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You bet. Anything else?
No. Thank you. And I want to clarify, I've got Brian Lindebaugh, I think, and Jason Gish that I assume were agents for the applicant. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, sorry. Then I'll go ahead and, Brian Lindebaugh, you're next.
You
morning, Commissioners. I'm Brian Lindeback, 411 North Webb Road, on behalf of Courtyards at Auburn Hills Homeowners Association. I represent Scott in some matters, but I work for MKEC Engineering. I've been doing PUDs and zoning cases for about 20 years, and I'd just like to see a show of hands from the audience here just to give you guys perspective of how many people are opposed to this case. So there's an overwhelming majority of folks. I think that crosses off number 8 on your list of golden rules fairly easily. We had an overwhelming number of people that are not in favor of this. So some of the golden rules, I think I would reiterate what everybody else has said, that there's only maybe 2 golden rules that aren't really applicable to this case. The rest of them, I think this case kind of trounces on. And some of those I'd specifically reference are 1, 2, 3, and 7, and 8. First of all, some of the owners in the blue area were not notified as far as the application. That's technicality as far as I'm concerned and heard. But I think one of the main points I want to make is that this use is not compatible. This is the highest commercial zoning available in all of Sedgwick County. It's the next above this is limited industrial. So it gives you some character. And having done zoning for quite some time, there's very few uses in limited industrial that you cannot do in general commercial. So I just want to make that point that this zoning is very intensive. It has the potential to generate a square footage as per the PUD of 600,000 square foot building. I can't hardly imagine how 600,000 square foot of building could fit on this 40 acres and be viable, but that's what the PUD allows for. You know, for some perspective, if you've been to Cabela's, that's about 80 to 85,000 square feet. So, you know, that's a very large structure. Their parking requirement is only 88 stalls. That is far inappropriate for this size of commercial development. One of the things that really bothers me the most about this PUD is its disregard for screening. It has no screening component to it. If you take a look at the adjoining zoning classification next door to it, it's SF20. That is the most restrictive zoning classification. So you have the very highest zoning classification next to the very lowest zoning classification. And in that, you need to be able to provide for buffers, some screening measures. This PUD states that no screening is required. Now, at Planning Commission, they added a buffer requirement, of a berm. There's no mention of what terms and provisions for that buffer, that berm is. So it could be a 2-foot tall berm as far as the code allows, but this is a PUD. It throws the code out. A PUD is a custom zoning classification that is unto itself. So all other codes are off the books, and it's only the provisions of this PUD that allow for the development. And when you don't have any screening, no wall requirements, you could have a 50-story, 50-foot tall building right next to a single-family house. That single-family house would have a 20-foot yard building setback in the back, and this property has a 35-foot building setback. So you could have a towering building right next to your single-family house, and I think that's kind of what we're saying here. Is this PUD is not compatible with the zoning that is allowed in here. And I think, in summary, this is just a bad PUD. There's a litany of other things I could talk to you about as far as the requirements of this PUD, if you care to hear. But I think it's very important that I share that this is just a bad PUD. It's poorly done. Things got through the system and to you today that should not have happened.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions. Next is Jason Gish.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jason Gish, MKEC, 411 North Webb. I'm here on behalf of Perfection Signature Properties, and you heard from Mr. Lehner, and also with him is his partner, Jason Ronk. And we do a lot of just the history of MKC. We do, as Brian described, a lot of zoning type related work through the metropolitan area here. And we work for a lot of residential developers in addition to commercial developers. And I need to tell you that when you work for a residential developer that does both, which we happen to do, they would in no way ever create a PUD with such little protection or compatibility disparity as this one. And so the details of that, for instance, there's always a requirement for some sort of transition, whether that the zoning code speaks to transitioning from zoning types, and you well know this, and what you're seeing here is a lack of regard for that with the major disparity between the two uses. And further, that north portion, including the single family 20 that was originally or currently zoned as such into this PUD, is rather, it doesn't comply. I mean, it may look small on the surface of adding this in, but there's no commercial driver here in this property. The reason it's been vacant for so long is obviously, once upon a time, 20 years ago or 30 or 40, when those properties were developed, they were in the county and they suited the needs of the county. But currently, through time, the city has expanded and primarily become single family through this edge. And of course, we understand that it's wise to keep the commercial along the highway. It makes total sense. But to encroach further north is very unfortunate and really should be addressed to have some sort of transitional language that would be a component. So the way it's written up, I don't think it's very supportive of what the current the zoning and comprehensive plan suggest. Further, in regards to other items, just because of all the folks here, there really is a desire from you to protect the value and the zoning that should be implemented in this property. And I think, given the fact that the SF20 is there and included as part of this PUD, that simply doesn't match the intent of really what's acceptable. There's been myriads of things. I don't want to repeat anything, but this is not set up, 135th Street, simply not set up for the traffic. It was recently improved. I think if there was really a reality that it's the danger of what can happen with this PUD in the future. I mean, the current uses isn't very stomachable by most people, but to come back and have something in the future expand upon this, it's extremely wide open to a myriad of uses that are way beyond a friendly residential neighbor. It's just simply not a good neighbor. So just to make sure I'm understood, the developers we work for would never, ever want to damage a relationship with other properties solely to make a buck, and there needs to be some protection of the zoning uses here, and this PUD simply doesn't have that, and we would just request that you would consider that carefully, and please vote no for this.
Commissioner Howell has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason Gish, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I was just curious, can you just help me imagine what other types of functions might be there should this event center someday want to transfer this to some other use under this existing PUD? What kind of things would be, what kind of things could you imagine going into this causing you the concern you just mentioned?
Yeah, well, as my associate mentioned earlier, because of the fact that general commercial basically has a lot of uses that are identical and overlay with limited industrial, you can get nightclubs, the parking area in itself, just a huge, massive parking area with all the lighting and such that's associated with that. You reference any kind of big commercial box, retail user, Walmarts, Targets, things of that nature could be implemented on this site. And I'll tell you, the reality is this PUD allows for the danger for some of that to happen too close on that northern end. Large warehouses, manufactured homes, those wouldn't be compatible with even the single family that's in the neighborhood in the area now. Those are the kinds of uses that just seem to be a direct conflict and transition with the neighborhoods that are there currently.
Mr. Gish, you actually read there's a lot of restrictions in the PUD.
Yes, sir.
Over what kind of things can go in here, and I guess maybe later on I probably will read that list because I think it's important for the room to know what we're talking about, what is allowed and what is not allowed. But the PUD actually has a lot of restrictions listed in it. I guess as I'm reading the PUD, I don't see how a Target or a warehouse could go in here based on the way this PUD is written currently. And as far as a nightclub goes, this is, I guess, specifically considered a nightclub, but it's got limits on what kind of events can. In other words, if it's a regular, I'm looking at. Let me find it here. Item D, I guess it's probably 6D. Is that right? Yeah, 6D. It says no business that is classified as a drinking establishment, tavern, Class A club, or Class B club under current Wichita, Kansas ordinances or codes shall be allowed. That's the type of restrictive language that's in this PUD and a number of other types of restrictions. And so the PUD would have to be changed by a governing body for those types of things to happen. I guess I'm curious, and if anybody else wants to speak to this, it's coming up in the future. I know there's a couple more speakers at least, but I guess I'd like to know what are the types of businesses under the current restrictions listed in the PUD that you could imagine that would cause that type of concern. Things you just mentioned a minute ago, I don't think that those would be allowed under the PUD, the way I'm reading it. But,
yeah, those are just the ones that are listed and mentioned as restricted. But I've got a whole list of things that could be added. The manufactured home park, group residences, auditoriums or stadiums, driving ranges, community assembly, car wash, convenience stores, marine facilities. There's just a myriad of things that typically I think could be, and then you go look at most CUPs that are adjacent to residential areas, you'll find further restrictions upon them.
Okay. All right. That's all my questions for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And to just answer your point further, including current SF20 zoning into this is really a very dangerous component because once you have that, no one's ever going to relinquish that would buy the property. That would be, you can do all the other uses or you can downzone it, but to encourage or allow more of this type of use further north into currently zoned SF20 really would be unfortunate, sir.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Next, we have Barbara Hall.
I'm Barbara Hall. I live at 1819 Smarsh, Wichita, Kansas. But I own the 61 acres that's adjacent on the north and the east sides of the 40 acres, requesting a rezoning. This PUD will potentially kill any possibilities of many of us developing our land, which we have purchased, or building homes on it. It worries me that one entity can come into an established community where hundreds of individuals have made the biggest investment most of them will ever make in their lifetimes, the purchase of their retirement home, and try to change the culture of the neighborhood by trying to change the established zoning for their own monetary needs to zoning that will not blend in with the culture and landscape that already exists. It's a grave concern that this peaceful retirement community will no longer be quiet, relaxing, a safe homeland, which is what the current zoning is suitable for. The applicant has chosen not to build a church as originally planned when I sold it for the church. I would not have sold it to the church for an entertainment venue, or if I had known they were planning to rezone the land to a PUD. The church now wants to change the zoning of the area for its own individual gain without regard for the existing community. Entertainment venues like the one being proposed, statistically speaking, have a dramatic effect on property values because of an increase in noise, heavy traffic, vandalism, and accidents. Existing homeowners will have their personal safety and their property safety put at risk when crime rates increase because of the type of planned development. The possibility of disorderly young people and youth in public places, along with long hours of operation, 7 days a week, serving alcohol, constitutes one of the most common problems police agencies must handle, especially in suburban and rural areas. There are more assaults in and around these types of venues, more graffiti, intimidation by younger people, large crowds are difficult to manage, loud car stereos, open air drug dealing, panhandling, rave parties, reckless bicycle riding, street cruising, underage drinking, blocking of sidewalks and streets, making offensive remarks to passerbyers, especially older people out for an evening walk, increased fighting and littering and harassing of individuals. Allowing this area to be rezoned to a PUD will have a negative impact on property values as compared to the existing zoning. With a PUD in the future, other venues could be established, multifamily apartments, homes converted to duplexes, chain stores that have caused property values to decline. The community is nearly unanimously in opposition to this PUD. Please protect this community and allow it to remain this great residential community that it is. You can see by the number of protest petitions and the members of the community opposing this rezoning petition that it is not wanted and will disrupt the residential characteristics of this community, many of whom are retired, and they are physically and mentally, they will not be able to deal with the noise and the additional traffic, the increase of theft and vandalism and security needed in the area. The quality of life will be diminished. Thank you.
Commissioner PETERJOHN.
I want to clarify a couple of things. I hope you can, you can see the map that I'm looking at. You own all the properties in red that are east of 135th, excluding that little piece of property that's at the southwest corner, including basically the 5 parcels that are north and east of the proposed area. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have an easement through the proposed property to get to the southeasternmost or southernmost parcel that you own?
Yes.
Could you describe that easement? And it looks like you've got a couple buildings on that property.
Now, are you talking, what kind of easement are you talking about?
Well, being able, it looks like a road easement to get, it looks like there's two buildings on that southernmost property that you've
yes.
got. And I wanted to understand a little bit more about those buildings and what the usage is, since my understanding is, isn't this area also single family 20, or is it zoned differently?
It's a barn for a horse.
Okay.
And a hay barn, those 2 buildings. And there is a road, but you come in on 135th.
135th?
Uh-huh. I can't see where. Is this 135th?
To the aerial, maybe that would help.
It won't help me. I'm directionally challenged.
There's the entrance to the church, and then this road loops around and comes back, and
there are my 2 barns. Uh-huh. So I have 2 barns, but we now come in right here.
Okay. Well, it looked like you might have access through the subject property.
There is a road there is a road that comes in, wherever I find the mouse, right here. But that's not my road anymore.
Okay, so you
It's
don't
the
have an
church.
easement there?
No.
Okay. Okay, I wanted to make sure I understood it because it looked like from the maps I had, and without going out in there and starting to stomp on the property too much, I wanted to clarify and understood what was there. So thank you very much.
There is a road, but this road will not be able to be used, as someone else mentioned before, because they're not going to let them have access to that when that flyover comes in.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Gish, I'm sorry, Ms. Hall, just another question for you, please. And thank you for your testimony this morning. I wanted to just ask you, I looked up your address. You live to the north and to the east of the subject property. Is that correct? Do you have about how many miles drive do you live from the?
About 15 minutes.
About 15 minutes. And do you ever? So, what's your interest in? You actually own most of the land around the subject property. You have the large lots there. What's your?
Well, I was planning to build a home.
Okay.
But I've been waiting to see what the church is going to do because I didn't want to be in a position like everyone else with a home there. But I also have talked to builders that want to develop the land. And they're not going to want to talk to me if this goes through. And I've invested a lot of money in there.
How long ago did you buy this property?
20 years ago.
Okay. How long has that church been there?
Since 2007.
7. Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And next is Greg Ferris.
Chairman Ranzel, members of the County Commission, my name is Greg Ferris. I reside at 144 South Bay Country Court in Wichita. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. As you saw, there were a number of hands that were raised for people that are here. I am actually speaking on their behalf, and I asked not to have 100 people come to the podium in deference to your time. So I may, with your permission, go a little beyond 3 minutes to keep a number. I will be the last speaker, so you won't have to listen to a number of other speakers. That'll be up to you, obviously. As Mr. Lindenbach said, this is a very bad PUD. It's a bad PUD for a number of reasons. With all due respect, Commissioner Howell, I can't find anything in the PUD that would not allow a large commercial building to locate on that property. I looked at what is not allowed, and that is not one of the things that's not allowed. Including things that are not allowed is a mobile home park or a manufactured home park. This property, you are not making this for an event center today. You need to be clear of that. You're doing a PUD, and the PUD erases all the rules of the zoning code and says what is written in the PUD is all that's in the requirements. And what is not exempted from the general commercial zoning district is allowed. So in reality, what you're doing today is you're rezoning that entire piece of ground, general commercial, with a few exceptions. And when you look at those exceptions, those are the normal exceptions like sexually oriented businesses, massage parlors, those kind of things are eliminated. But the things like mobile home parks, car lots, car washes, a hotel, those are not exempted. Those are allowed to be built right next to the single family zoning, which is not typically done in urban settings. And I think that's an important distinction. You all legislate ground that's in the county, but you represent everybody, and it really makes you in a very difficult situation sometimes because you have to balance what you normally are used to for rural settings, and in this case you have an urban setting because everything around here is basically urban. It's basically the city of Wichita. So you have to change your thinking a little bit of what you might stick out in a rural setting where some of those restrictions like a mobile home park and some of those things may not apply. you need to think about those a little bit more. And that includes stuff like security and landscaping and those types of things. All of those things are not in the PUD. And I do PUDs, and the reason we do PUDs is so we can throw out all the rules. That's what a PUD does, throws out all the rules. And then you make the rules in the PUD. This PUD is very short on rules. It's short on security. A gravel parking lot right across the street from $175,000 homes that are going to have 88 cars leaving at 1 o'clock in the morning, stirring up dust and all of that, that works in a rural setting. It does not work in an urban setting. This PUD should have paved parking if you're going to allow that many cars. This PUD does not even comply with what staff recommended. They recommended a 2-for-1 parking, so that would be 175 parking spaces. Planning Commission went with the applicant for 4-to-1, much, much less restrictive. Planning staff recommended no outdoor music. Planning Commission waived that provision. So not even the recommendation of the planning staff was followed by the Planning Commission and what you have today in front of you in a PUD. You know, just to kind of summarize some of the things that were said, there are lots of children in this area. I don't know who thought there weren't any kids, but there are lots of kids. My son, driving to school, drove up and down 135th Street. That's the way you get to the Goddard schools. That area of Auburn Hills is numerous families that live there. There are lots of children and 16-year-olds that will be driving here, coming home at 11 o'clock at night from whatever activity they were that will be impacted by people leaving, coming out of that area. All of that aside, the fact that it's a terrible PUD and it doesn't have the restrictions that should be in there, you have one job as an elected official, and that is to follow the review criteria that's set out in the Unified Zoning Code, which we more commonly call the Golden Rules. When I read the staff report on this, I was actually a little surprised that it was recommended for approval, because even if you read the staff's recommendations and you read the zoning and character of the neighborhood, which is number 1, the zoning and character of that neighborhood, according to staff, is residential, except on the south portion, which is already zoned general commercial. So you don't even need to rezone any of that to allow some of the things that they want to do. So according to staff, the character of the neighborhood is residential, which we also concur are residential. When you talks about the suitability for the land of how it's already zoned, the only thing they cite is that land along Kellogg is normally commercial. You know what? It already is. But this land, the north part of this, is adjacent to residential. It is directly across from existing residential. It is clearly suitable for residential. A residential developer told you he'd be interested in that. So it clearly is suitable for what it's been zoned for today. Another point of the Golden Rules. But even written in his staff report, I'm reading right from his staff report. Conformance with the comprehensive plan. That is one of the items in the review criteria that you're supposed to consider. The north 20 acres in the comprehensive plan is residential. So this does not comply with the comprehensive plan. We're now at 3. This isn't mine. You read mine. I sent it to you. This is their recommendation. This is your planning staff's recommendation. Impact on community facilities. And I quote, because of the serving and consumption of alcoholic liquor or cereal malt beverage is allowed to possibility as many as 350 people, there is a possible negative effect on the area, which could increase the presence of law enforcement. Enforcement could be problematic for the Metropolitan Area Building and Construction Department because they're not available after hours. This is not my report. This is their report. So even the Golden Rules, the review criteria as set out by your own staff, do not warrant a yes vote. To go beyond that, the relative gain and safety to the public, I think when you look at the impact of the water, excuse me, with alcohol and water, no safety people, no lifeguards, no security requirements. Clearly, this does not have any gain to the public health and safety. And when you compare that to what it says specifically, loss and value of the hardship, that south 20 acres is already zoned commercial. If they did the PUD on that south 20 acres, they could have done what they wanted to do. It's large enough. They're going to expand that lake into that area. So there is no loss to the applicant by removing this, by not allowing this today. Talked about the impact of community facilities. They do have access and will have access to Kellogg. Not to Kellogg itself. Nobody will have access to Kellogg. But if you look at that drive that comes out to the south, it will access the access road that will be built in the future. So this PUD should at least not have any access to 135th, because that's where the residential property is. It's a two-lane road. There is no way to adequately access that with all the residential properties and those things. So that's another shortfall in the PUD, because this is going to have a negative impact on that two-lane road when you dump those cars out onto that area. You have my findings. 7 out of the 9 are listed as negative impacts, where you could easily cite these and say these do not comply with our review criteria. Staff wrote review criteria, and you cannot find in theirs a basis for approval of this zoning case. This PUD should be outrightly rejected today. It should not be approved. And that's, you have the opposition of the neighbors because you have the protest petitions. And Mr. Peterjohn, to correct you, even if this was in the city, the notification requirements and the state requirements would be the same. It's 200 feet in the state, and that's all that's allowed no matter where it's in the city or county. And because of the size of this parcel, the notification would still have been 1,000 feet. So they would have had to go out to notify 1,000 feet even if it was in the city limits. So that would have been, you probably never deal with that because it's in the county. So, but that would have required them to notify the same people that were notified, that should have been notified. Some of them didn't get notified, but still would have been the same. And Mr. Howell, when you asked how many people opposed this that were in the protest area, it's because there's only 200 feet. When you go back to that map, and see if I can figure out how to work your, going the wrong way, I think. When you look at this and you look at the blue, these are people who also submitted protest petitions. While they are not in the legal area, they are very much impacted and made a point of submitting a negative. With that, I would say that the review criteria as set out in the Unified Zoning Code is very specific. A lot of times, it's hard to distinguish what it means. Whether, oh, you can make it work here. You can't make it work here. You can make it work on the South 20. I'm not going to argue about that south portion. It's the north portion that concerns me, and this PUD includes all of that. So you need to reject this PUD. They can come back and file on that south half at another time if that's what they intend to do. But this is not a PUD for an event center. This is a PUD for general commercial zoning with a very few limitations. With that, I thank you for allowing me to go over my time. We will not have any more people come up and bother you, and be glad to answer any questions.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Well, thank you. Well, let me clarify and correct you on one point, Greg. It's not, you're not bothering us. This is an important part of any public hearing.
Thank you.
And I want to thank the public who came out and anybody who may be watching. And I've had a lot of folks communicate with me on this issue in the last couple of weeks, in fact, going back to last year. I do want to quibble with you a little bit on a point here, because I had a lot of questions with staff and just got briefed on this, in fact, yesterday afternoon, and we got into a discussion about the 200 feet versus the 1,000 feet. And normally in the county zoning cases, we're looking at 1,000 feet. And the reason I brought up that point is that when we get into this situation, that because of the unusual location of this property and it being so close to the city of Wichita, we get into this situation in terms of whether the 200 feet or 1,000 feet apply, and it gets complicated. And I've had a lot of questions for county staff on it, and in a case like this, I'd be inclined to defer, try and have as much participation as possible. But for the map that's up here, if they can see the map, to see why in some cases, it seems like we're looking at 200 feet versus 1,000 feet. So, and exactly how far that extends in and how that works. So,
It's always
you said
hard to
it's only
understand.
200 feet. On this point, I'm kind of a county guy and looking at 1,000. And if you'd like to clarify that at all, since you have a lot more experience on city zoning cases than I have.
Well, you did notify 1,000 feet on this, and you would have notified 1,000 feet anyway. Dale, I think the 200 feet state statute, isn't it? Just for city. So you're correct that the protest could have been for the 1,000 if this was all in the county, which would have ran your numbers up to probably 85% protest.
Okay. The other question I'd have, and I don't know if this is a question for you or if there's another person who can provide an answer to this, exactly how many signatures were provided in opposition to this? Do you have a number?
57 were submitted in the blue that you see here, and then an additional 144 today.
So 50
over 200 people, and those 144 names were gathered. I was contacted last Thursday, and I suggested that beyond just that immediate 1,000 feet, there probably were more people that were impacted, and that you might want to talk to those. Those are all from the Auburn Hills area, which is, in that white area up to the north and east, and to the white area that is to the north and west.
Okay.
That's where those 144.
I wanted to get the 201 or whatever the number was into the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this,
Hey, can I have a...
no, please.
I'm sorry that 57 were the number I turned in. Barbara, how many did you turn in?
I don't know. I haven't copied it home.
There's more than that number. Because...
Are you talking about the ones on the list?
Yeah.
57 that just were on a list, not actually on the list.
But I turned in 57, and I know you turned in probably another 40 or 50.
57.
Okay.
I apologize, Mr. Peterjohn. I thought they had turned them in together. I apologize, Mr. Peterjohn. Again, Greg Ferris for the record to answer your question. It appears that we had 101 plus the 144.
101 plus 144, so 245. Is that the consensus of you think what the?
Again, I apologize. I thought that his numbers and her numbers were the same,
Well,
but she had two different people turning them in.
I mean, obviously, I want to try and get the record correct, regardless of what the
I
number
know you
is,
do.
but would like to have an idea. So, thank you. And
Thank you.
If that 245 is wrong, and somebody can clarify it, I'd like to get a.
That appears to be correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I want to ask if anyone else wants to speak in opposition to this that has not already spoken. Even though this is not a formal public hearing, we do allow people to speak, and I know you signed up in case there's someone else who wants to speak. We'll allow that. Okay, at this point, then, is anyone here representing the applicant who would like to speak and respond to what's been presented?
Good morning, Commission. I'm Russ Avey, agent for the applicant, and I am here on behalf of the applicant in looking for the event center. I had a chance yesterday to review again the minutes, not only of the Planning Commission meeting, but also the staff comments and the added staff comments following the Planning Commission meeting. And I don't think that I can give you an overview of the discussion leading up to what is presented here today in a more concise manner, so I won't. In deference of time, I'll just simply try to address some of the relevant points that I heard here this morning. We heard a lot that would fall under this umbrella of NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. This is a property where we initially looked at residential development over the last 8 years for various clients of ours. Like MKEC, we too are in the business of representing residential and commercial and industrial clients on development matters such as this. Like some of the speakers, I do have several decades of experience standing before the governing body, trying to work on behalf of not only our clients, but future clients that may own surrounding property. So Again, I don't want the record to state that we are indifferent to the surrounding property owners' interests, for we also represent similar types of interests. There was a lot of discussion, almost a primer on the golden rules. One of the recurring thoughts is listening to the last hour of discussion is, why do we have the golden factors involved in zoning matters? The golden case hallmarks the idea that zoning property and property rights that go along with zoning private property isn't a matter to be determined by the public at large. It is a matter that the golden factors sought to even the playing field to address that not only surrounding property owners have rights, but so does the applicant. And it tries to provide a framework by which city and county staff can review an application as to the merits and the impact that it would have. There's also been a lot of critique about the quality of the planned unit development. The intent of preparing this planned unit development drew on primarily two different source materials. We were requested by staff to look at an earlier PUD for an event center in the county. I believe it's called Rustic Timbers, if I recall. We were asked to borrow a lot of that language since that was one that was recently approved amid controversy. One of the other source materials for our event center restrictions came from my working with a restrictive covenant for the waterfront development near 13th and Webb Road, pretty much in the center of a quarter section surrounded by urban scale development. Coupled with that, we felt like we were able to present to the Planning Commission a fairly concise, well-constructed plan unit development. I think the staff report reflects their agreement with that. And I would note that a 12-0 approval by a Planning Commission after lengthy discussion also bears out that there must have been few issues to be had with the construct of the planned unit development. In fact, I would say somebody that trumps all of our experience in reviewing zoning matters actually made the motion to approve. So with that, I'll get on to more of the more technical issues that were brought up. I know that there's been concern growing since we're at Planning Commission with the paving requirement, or I should say the lack of paving requirement. We're willing to address that in front of the Commission. One of the other issues dealt with berming and the screening or the apparent lack of screening requirements. And again, what we're seeing here is a fairly wide open, large-scale property or large-scale development on a large piece of property. The sheer distance between the actual activities and the actual residential activities is fairly staggering. I mean, we are 700 to 900 feet away in many directions from actual homes to the event center. The property that's in question here that's highlighted in red, I believe you saw, this is an example of, I believe, is the floodplain floodway map. The property in question to the north and to the east simply has limitations inherent to the property itself for residential development, or residential development that would offset the cost of having to go in there and extend municipal services. The question's been raised is why this 40 acres, the subject property, wouldn't be beneficial for or viable for residential development. As I mentioned earlier, our office worked with 3 different clients to do single-family home development. The cost of acquiring general commercial property for single-family uses is simply prohibitive in many instances. So I would state that the reason that this would not be viable for single-family residential is an economic factor. Ms. Hall, who previously owned this 40 acres, spoke very well at not only this morning's meeting, but at the Planning Commission about the impact that it has on her ability to do what she wishes to do with the balance of her property. My only contention with her claim is that she was the one person in this room that had the ability, at the time she sold it to the church, to place a deed restriction on there, accounting for the fact that 25 of the 40 acres is already zoned heavy commercial, general commercial, or heaviest commercial zoning district. If the concerns were so great as to bring a room full of people here this morning, I would say that there was the ability in the past to have prevented this altogether. There was a lot of discussion about this isn't in the character of the neighborhood. You know, my argument is what constitutes the neighborhood. How do you define that? The residential areas to the northwest and north, if you've been on the site, is buffered by old growth trees along a creek bed. Coupled with the setbacks of activities, you know, we talked a little bit about building setbacks, but we also have setbacks on where the location of certain noise generating activities will occur, which is in the south center portion of our 40 acres. So I think if one really truly reviews how this plan is to operate, one will see that we try to concentrate all the activities towards the south side of our site. We're 250 feet away from Mays Road, or 135th Street. We are several hundred feet away from the north and east property lines as well. So again, I would make the argument that yes, there was a great deal of concern and effort put into designing this PUD in order to offset some of the concerns stated here today. Just one other item. I think Mr. Ferris stated that we do have, in fact, access to Kellogg Drive. That is not correct. All of our access is limited by a KDOT condemnation to 135th Street West. So with that, I'll stand for any questions that I may be able to answer.
I have a question. Clarify, you're saying on behalf of the people that own it now, you've tried to get someone interested in develop this into single-family homes?
That is correct.
All 40 acres?
All 40 acres.
And you haven't been able...
quite frankly, 40 acres plus some of Ms. Hall's property to the north.
And haven't found anyone who's willing to do that?
No.
Or could make that work?
No, and I don't want to state that it's impossible or that it can't be done. We just simply haven't found a client. Quite frankly, we were involved in the development of Auburn Hills. Part of our partnership with some of those developers looked at this site. Other home builders in Sedgwick County have looked at this site for not only urban scale development, but also horse-related suburban activity, so large lot to make use of the equestrian facilities on site. With the cost of extending sewer to the site, at the time water was not available, all these played into the cost of development, of putting infrastructure into this site. Most recently for the church, we looked at a mixed-use development that included not only single-family homes, some commercial utilizing the existing general commercial, but also some multifamily uses.
Okay. Commissioner PETERJOHN?
Thank you. I want to clarify and get very specific. The appendage sticks out and touches just the southernmost piece that touches Kellogg Drive. At this point, that has been condemned by KDOT. Did I hear you correctly in
that
saying
is correct.
that? So that there is no way to access that property from that. Your only access is off of 135th Street.
That is correct.
Okay. I appreciate getting that clarification for the record. Let me ask you, I received, when I was briefed yesterday afternoon on this, a description and general provisions, and on page 3, number 9, there were discussions, and if you have that in front of you, for the PUD 2015-6, there was discussions about landscaping requirements shall be per the Wichita Sedgwick County Unified Zoning Code. Existing landscaping shall be considered as meeting this requirement. And then goes on to state, and it appears to be, I think, a conflict here, screening around the perimeter of the PUD shall not be required. A landscape plan, including berming along the north and west sides of the site, shall be submitted for review and approved by the planning director. Would you kind of try and clarify that for me? Because one of the concerns I have was getting a little briefing on this, and there were a number of individual discrepancies that by themselves weren't terribly significant, but it was sort of like, if you don't mind a little metaphor, sticking my hand into a haystack and maybe not finding a needle. But in this case, I when I was looking through this, I stuck my hand in, and there were a number of areas, and this was one that jumped out most significantly to me, and my hand came out, my haystack metaphor, and I felt like my hand was a bit of a pincushion. So if you could discuss what's actually required in terms of what we had and what was meant and what did the Planning Commission actually approve, I'd like to get your input, please.
Absolutely. Thank you. So in the last 3 years, we have done 4 PUDs that dealt with acreage in excess of 20 acres. So again, I mentioned earlier some large area development, not necessarily large scale development. We try to look at the property from a standpoint that just screening is to protect negative impacts from encroaching onto adjoining property owners. One hopefully remedies that issue either by having your uses closer to the property line and screening it physically through a combination of walls and landscaping. But another way that we've historically done adverse impact or trying to nullify adverse impact is by simply creating a great distance between the activity and adjoining property owners. And in this situation, we are looking at a PUD that is going to expand the lake, that's going to create approximately a 500-foot separation from noise generating activities to the east property line. We are holding a 200-foot setback along the north property line, again, in an effort to mitigate any impact there, and a 250-foot activity setback along 135th Street. So when we look at that, we look at the scale of development, we look at the type of uses that are being proposed, and our location from adjoining single-family residential property. We have been successful in those other PUDs in eliminating any type of prescribed wall requirement as the screening requirement. Planning Commission, governing bodies have been in agreement with that each and every time. We applied that same standard here. Quite frankly, if you look through the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting, there was little discussion, quite frankly, about screening or the need for screening. However, as we discussed this pond and the fact that, and I believe actually Kelly Dixon spoke on behalf of the county code enforcement, when we excavate and expand this lake on the east third of the property, we are going to generate quite a bit of dirt from that extraction. We would need special zoning in order to take that dirt off site. That was part of just some ancillary discussion during the course of that Planning Commission meeting. One or two of the planning commissioners at the time asked out loud towards the end of the proceeding, why don't you utilize that dirt for screening purposes? Why don't you utilize that dirt for berming purposes? And and to add to the confusion, I was thinking we could utilize that along the north and east property lines, but the Planning Commission, the two planning commissioners specifically requested that we apply whatever dirt that lake yields, we apply that to berming along the north and west sides of the property. Which, as it turns out, based on the testimony here, that's probably where the berming would be most useful to try to nullify future impacts. So that's where we're getting this somewhat confusing, perhaps, berming requirement. We are going to berm using the extracted materials from the site, and we simply don't know what that's going to look like at this point. We haven't designed that pond. So one of the factors was to, once we get to that point, to bring it back under the guise of a landscape plan for approval by the planning director.
Okay, so we're basically at the end talking about ultimately going to the planning director for approval, so it's open and subjective at this point.
Sure.
Let me jump up on that same page, 6J, talking about, I think the comment was made in terms of outside of the hours, in terms of 10 a.m., it says here 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. between April 1st through September 30th. I thought I also heard some discussions about 10 a.m. through 10 p.m. And I'd also raised the question then, so that if there were an event out there, say October 1st, some fairly nice weather here in Kansas occurs in October, there'd be no restrictions on this for anything from October 1st through March 31st from reading that. Is my reading of that correct?
If I understand you correctly, let me address your first question first. Item J discusses the ancillary outdoor speaker system that would be employed as part of the outdoor recreation and entertainment use. Think of Rock Rapids swimming complex there in Derby, Kansas. I believe that was one of the examples that I gave, where you have water activities going on and you have some low-level mood music, I guess, if you will, or background music, if you will, playing. That sound system, as part of the outdoor recreation use, would terminate at 8 p.m. at night. The actual activity of having the outdoor and entertainment use open to the public would cease at 10 p.m. So music turns off at 8 p.m. The use ceases at 10 p.m.
But
They're willing to
only between April 1st and September 30th. From October 1st through March 31st, there's no limitation
that would
contained
be
here, right? That was my final question.
Well, if there's confusion, we'd be more than happy to correct it here and now. No, the intent is from October 1st through May 31st would be to preclude any type of outdoor speaker system being used over those winter, late fall, early spring, winter months.
Well, you said May 31st. I think you meant March 31st.
March 31st.
Yeah, okay. Well, because...
So we would not have any noise-generating activities as part of the outdoor entertainment system or use as part of that audio system outside of the summer months.
Okay.
There was some discussion that some of these activities would be seasonal. Our client was willing to offer that up as a remedy.
The sheet I was given in the previous page on Section 6E discussed basically saying from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. On Friday and Saturday nights, but initially I was told 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. or noon local time, Sunday through Thursday, and then I was told no, it actually was 12, it was after midnight. One of the concerns I had in terms of looking at this was I felt very much like this seemed to be a moving target because the concerns I was hearing from a lot of people had been in terms of late night noise, and obviously weekends are a little bit different than weekdays. But if the original sheet I had here indicated was from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. local time, so I want to try and. This is why my hand's feeling a little bit like a pincushion, and I want to get some input from you to clarify specifically for the record, because the last statement here says from 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. local time, Sunday through Thursday, and that would cut it off before a lot of folks even finish their lunch.
Mr. Miller pointed that issue out to me late yesterday afternoon, and I had sent him a revised PUD text. All through the Planning Commission minutes, I think it was quite clear, as well as obviously since this language has been barred from several other event centers that we've been a part of, the intent was always that certain activities ceased at midnight. Some were allowed, as far as the breakdown of the event would be allowed into the morning of 1 a.m. So I think in the discussion we all, I think it was quite clear that we were intending to operate from 8 a.m. to midnight, the event center. The simple oversight on PM versus AM was my mistake.
Okay. Well, it was one of the reasons, one of the areas that I had as a concern on page 1 of this document, item 5, talks about either the county sign code or city sign code. Could you kind of clarify exactly which areas are county sign code covered versus city?
Well, I think the origin of that document, as well as, or of that language in Section 5, as well as other language throughout this PUD, is we're kind of straddling the fence here a little bit between being adjoining and surrounded by the city of Wichita, but yet being in the county. So there are a number of issues that we try, again, in putting the PUD together, we try to account for what can happen currently and what can happen once annexation occurs. Since a few of the speakers pointed out, one of the things that was correct on what they pointed out was the fact that a PUD is a custom zoning district. So you have to account for, you have to add back in certain standards that are traditionally a part of a commercial development. So what we try to do here is give them sign rights. We have to prescribe them sign rights. And so we did so in a manner that both acknowledged the fact that we were going to have, perhaps for the interim period, this operating in the county. So we wanted to fall back to the county sign code, but in the event that this would be annexed into the city, we would want any further development or redevelopment to fall under those regulations.
Because the language says, or uses the word "or," which leaves it open-ended in terms of which shall go, as opposed to saying, the county sign code shall apply while it's in the county, and if it gets annexed, then we'll fall under the city code, as opposed to saying, okay, it'd be grandfathered for under continuing use. But that it doesn't say that there. It's left it as an "or," which makes it open-ended, and in my mind, that's the reason I'm asking the question and trying to get a clarification.
The intent on stating, depending when the subject property is annexed, to me was what tried to clarify the fact that if annexed, it's obviously going to fall under the city sign code, but prior to its annexation, that it would be governed by the county sign code. I'd be more than willing to work with Mr. Miller on and county counselor staff to put together more appropriate language or more definitive language, but that's the intent.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a number of questions for you, so I just want to clarify a couple things. The SF20, is that 15 acres? It's on the subject property? Is that SF20 currently zoned? Is that 15 acres?
That's 15 acres.
And on the south end is 25 acres. That's general commercial.
That's correct.
Is there any restrictions right now as to what could go in the general commercial? As far as, could we see all kinds of things be put in there as it is currently zoned? Is there any restrictions as to what somebody might do down there, like pawn shops or warehouses or sexually oriented businesses?
Sure. I think we had a number of speakers who were reading through the laundry list of general commercial uses. Yeah.
So including, like, for example, a drinking establishment or a sexually oriented business, that could go in there right now?
I don't want to get into the specifics of the zoning code, but quite frankly, no. You heard testimony on a laundry list of different nefarious uses, if you will. That's what's written down as permitted uses, but one of the things that these speakers simply failed to mention, because it doesn't suit them, is the fact that most of these nefarious uses have other contingencies, mainly proximity to residential zoning. So, no, we couldn't put an event center, even if it's in the city, without a zoning action. We couldn't put a nightclub or a sexually oriented business on this property because of our proximity, and Dale, correct me if I'm wrong, our proximity to residential zoning. So just because we have the zoning, we would still have to perfect that with a conditional use, or in this situation, a CUP.
What about manufactured homes? Could they go into the entire 40 acres? Is that correct right now?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
So no limit on manufactured housing going in there right now?
No.
What about...
or manufacturing plants, asphalt plants.
So really, it's wide open right now. Without changing anything, we could see those types of activities going there right now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
At a large scale, type of development, yes. Mm-hmm.
This PUD, in my opinion, then adds a lot of restrictions that are not currently in place. This limits what can happen to a very narrow field of activities, whereas the current zoning would allow all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Would you be opposed to us adding a couple of things to the restricted list? I mean, if we wanted to add a comment that said that the manufactured housing could not be part of this, and a car lot or a hotel or a warehouse would be listed as the restricted types of businesses that would not be allowed in this. There's a long list of them already. I'll say it's in item number 6, I believe. Yeah, item number 6 on the PUD. Would you be opposed to adding a couple of those items to that list?
I don't want to split hair. Most of what you said was fine. I think a hotel would probably be a pretty good location at the intersection.
But they'd always come back and ask for a change to the PUD if that was the case. I mean, so would you be opposed to us adding those concerns? I mean, if those are the things they're worried about, and one of the speakers, I think, said that they're not so much concerned about this proposal, but they're concerned about what happens if this one was to fail and it sells to the next tenant, which might be something entirely different, and they're concerned about what that might be. So I guess I asked a number of questions to some of the speakers to list some of those ideas, and that's kind of the things I heard was a hotel, a warehouse, a car lot, a gun range might be another good one. And by the way, the berm is already there, so the gun range might be really interesting thing to add there. But and I love gun ranges, okay? But maybe that would be something we ought to add. You know, a gun range would be one of those. So you would not be opposed to adding a few of these descriptions to this?
I've got gun range, car lot, hotel, warehouse, manufactured housing.
Okay.
Would have no problem.
And so in a sense, that actually creates a restriction to the entire 40 acres, which right now does not exist.
Correct.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. Let's, as far as the berm height, you know, it seems to me that when the berm was discussed, and it being on the north and the east, it seems like the intent for that would be to shield noise. I don't know actually exactly what the point of that would be, but now that we're talking about the north and the west, it seems to me like the intent of that is for aesthetics and to shield the view. Is that what you understand the purpose of the berm is? Is it about noise or aesthetics?
Probably a combination of both. Quite frankly, in the context of the waning minutes of that planning commission meeting, and Dale was in attendance, he can give his own insights into it, probably to counter mine. But quite frankly, it was a method to get rid of dirt that we had no other way to get rid of. So it kind of was a win-win-win situation, I suppose, if you want to consider it.
Well, as far as aesthetics goes, the subject property, if you were to bring the this berm, if it was to be on the west side and maybe just a little bit to the north side, not very much, but a little bit to the north side, it would probably block the view very, very well from 135th Street. As far as noise goes, there's already, you said, old-growth trees and things like that to the north of this. So that's essentially going to accomplish the same thing as a berm would accomplish in terms of noise abatement. And so I'm not so sure what the purpose of the berm on the north side would because it's really not about aesthetics or noise on the north side. I don't see that as being useful. Now on the west side, if it's for aesthetics, potentially that would be useful there. But so I guess I would like to clarify. To me, the west side is the most interesting side of this property that would potentially benefit from a berm.
I would agree.
Okay, let's. Kellogg access, and I apologize for visiting this again, but I'm still not clear. There's a service road along Kellogg, is that correct?
That is correct.
And right now, access to the storage units and the antique mall and those other businesses right there, they access those from the service road currently.
That is correct. Actually, it's a platted street. It's Harry Street. Okay. It's half-street right-of-way that's been platted and paved for decades.
Will that continue to be there?
That services that property. I have asked, and I have not seen any design plans for the actual reconstruction of this interchange system, but what has typically happened, and Mr. Spears may be able to provide some general oversight that I can't, but in general terms, they will design that frontage road system and most likely tear out what's there now and then put back the existing access for those businesses along there.
Because I don't see a way for them to get to 135th Street without going across another whole section of land there. So it seems like they've got to access that from a service road or something from the south to their property.
But let me add this. So when Kellogg gets expanded and there's an off-ramp developed or designed, it will cut off. There will be no access from where my cursor is, at least from this point, our southeasternmost point. There is complete access control all along here to 135th Street, including Mr. Lusk's commercial property at the intersection. All access to these properties will be off of 135th Street. So these people will still maintain access off of that frontage road system, but anything from roughly this point west will be complete access control.
You mentioned Mr. Lusk's property there on the corner. What is it currently zoned as?
GC General Commercial.
So it could be anything, including car lots, a quick trip. It could be who knows what.
That is correct.
And my guess is because of the expansion on Kellogg, that's probably going to be developed, I would expect at some point, with some kind of a that's pretty pricey land.
And I'll point out, too, I just mentioned that there are a number of these, nefarious, again, for lack of a better term, uses that wouldn't be restrained by the proximity rule, because these properties across the street also have general commercial zoning. So there are ways that you're going to get much more intensive commercial, the potential for much more intense commercial uses on the Lusk property as opposed to anything further to the north.
Let me see if I have any other questions. I may have. Chairman, would it be okay if I find my other questions to call him back up again later? Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
The commissioners have any other questions? Commissioner Unruh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Avey, is it possible, if this were to go forward, that something could be done to mitigate the dust from the parking lot, and if it's going to be a gravel lot? It seems to me like that's could be a real issue ongoing every day if it's got cars running in and out of gravel.
In reflecting on this one part, it was brought up a number of times here. The one issue that I would actually agree is a relevant, salient point to this PUD was our borrowing of the language from Rustic Timbers that basically gave it the access drives and paved and parking areas shall be paved in accordance to the county paving standards for an all-weather surface. It was brought up by one of the gentlemen, one of the owners across to the west of the site about dust. Planning staff initially wasn't all that in favor of having the county standard applied to the parking surface. Granted, all the handicap spaces and certain drive aisles would be paved, obviously, but in reflecting, that's the one thing that I can't stand up and argue for, I think there's very little, in talking with our engineers, there's very little that we can do in the way of dust mitigation, except having a water truck circle the parking lot every couple hours. At some point, you get into the just the cost and the maintenance of that cost, or the cost of the maintenance of that type of surface, as probably being more cost beneficial just to simply pave it to the code, to the Unified Zoning Code standard. The other issue that we've reflected on here in the last probably 48 hours has been the inability to stripe these parking spaces as individual parking spaces. So from a code enforcement standpoint, it's impractical to try to figure out how many parking spaces you have if you can't stripe and identify them. So I think one of the weakest things about this PUD is our suggestion that we are able to use a gravel parking surface. So if the commission sees the benefit of having parking areas and drive aisles paved to the code standard, then we would not oppose that.
Okay, I think I followed that very detailed explanation.
It's getting hot in here.
Another question I have, how high is a berm?
It's a function of how much material we have and where we locate it. We've got a third of a mile, and we probably have 1,900 feet along the north and west property lines. If we truncate that along the north property line to coincide with a couple hundred feet east of the northwest corner of our site and down, we would be able to get berms higher. We're going to have a finite amount of material on site, which was where we were getting this berming requirement to begin with. It's a function of how much material we have and the linear feet of where that would go. So if we were to string it out along the entire west and north property lines, we would have shorter berms. If we were to go the entire length of the west property line and say 200 feet along the north property line going east, then we would have taller berms, obviously.
But we could establish that we want berms that are at least 6 foot high.
That's correct. You could request berms that would be 20 feet high. Yeah, that would be something that could be prescribed as part of this PUD. We would think that a 3-foot berm would probably be a reasonable amount based on the existing elevation of the site. So,
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think that's okay right now.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We won't have any other questions this time, so I guess we'll have Dale come back up. Dale, I have some questions.
Okay.
I just want to clarify, and we've had some speakers speak about it, some of these issues, but I want to just clarify. So, right now, 25 of this acres is in general commercial, which allows for a lot of stuff. Correct?
The pink area.
The pink area
is zoned general commercial, and it allows for a broad range of commercial and retail activities. The way I usually explain it to folks is the limited commercial district, which is the red area further south. You can have a Walmart, you could have a Dillon's, you could have a convenience store. The main difference between limited commercial and general commercial is that in general commercial you can have outside storage, you can have car lots by right, you can have car washes by right, provided that there's, and as Russ alluded to, there's supplemental use regs that if they're within a certain distance it may trigger a conditional use, but in GC they're allowed by right. You can have any kind of retail commercial activity.
Sam's, Walmart.
Yes.
Is there anything more permissible than general commercial?
Well, in the zoning code, the next highest or the next category would be the central business district, but it'd be unlikely that the commission would approve that in a remote area like this.
But you can do a lot of. So currently, right now, they could by right do any number of things.
There's a large laundry list of economic uses that the property could be put to as it's currently zoned.
They could drive a lot of traffic, a lot of okay. Now, if this PUD is approved, I mean, there are some things. It says that it can do general commercial, except it can't do a bunch of. It has a whole laundry list. But I'm also looking at number 17. It says the development of the property shall proceed in accordance with the development plan. And any substantial deviation of the plan as permitted by the zoning administrator or the director of planning shall constitute a violation of building permit. So, for example, so this gets approved and all of a sudden they say they want to build a hotel, can they just start building a hotel, or would that be considered a violation of this PUD?
If you did not put it in a specifically prohibited list of uses, the catch-all here that in the event that the event center does not materialize or doesn't stay there, that all uses allowed in GC except the ones specifically prohibited would be allowed. And so unless you put that in the list of prohibited uses, it would be allowed.
Okay, what about this 17 that says any substantial deviation of the plan shall be a violation?
Well, what that language is our standard language that if you want to do something that's not permitted, then you have to go through the official process of either getting an adjustment or an amendment through the procedures. So that there's,
I see.
Yeah.
So right now they could, in part of this, put up a hotel right now.
On the GC,
yeah,
yes.
By right.
Yes.
So they're already being restricted more than, at least on the south part, not on the north part. This would restrict them more than what they're restricted now, if it was passed by now, as far as uses.
If this were approved, then it would be correct to say that the GC area would have restrictions on it after this is approved that it does not have now.
Okay.
But it also would have the additional event center use.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, with respect to berming and screening and stuff, I want to clarify, is the reason that we don't have any berms required here is because, as somebody said, that the buffering is or screening or buffering basically is accommodated by the distances that you have between there's hundreds of feet there, I think, to the north there. Is that a form of buffering as well, and that was taken into consideration?
Setback is a form of buffering, and it's a standard use in the zoning code as a way to mitigate impacts on adjoining properties. Obviously the recommendation that you have here is the recommendation that the Planning Commission felt was appropriate given the circumstances and the testimony that they heard.
Okay. Commissioner Unruh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dale, I typically am adverse to go against the recommendations of planning staff and the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. We have those folks in place to kind of give us guidance on these things. I don't really know what my question is, but in light of the testimony we've had today, can you give me just a comment, your observation of how thoroughly this was vetted at staff and Planning Commission level, and any sort of response to the claim that this is a terrible PUD?
Well, staff has got pretty thick skin when it comes to criticisms of staff's report. What we think we do every time is that we try and look at it from both sides and present arguments that are valid representations of concerns from both the applicant and anybody that might be opposed to it. Include that information in there so that the report is not a one-sided report, that the Planning Commission and the governing body has the things that we think are important brought to their attention, and then you all make the decision on how that's going to work. So in this sense, it's my opinion that this PUD was reviewed as rigorously as any others that we have had in the past, and that we try and be honest with our assessments about what could happen so that those issues are brought up, and then nobody later can say, well, that wasn't in the staff report, you left it out, and it might have made a difference. And so, like I said, we try and be even-handed from both perspectives, put that information in there. As alluded to earlier, agents get paid to represent the interests of the people that they're representing. And so they do the best job they can given the role that they're playing, and staff understands that, I think, is a fair assessment.
Okay, well, thank you. This is difficult consideration, but thank you for that. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Norton?
Dale, along 54 Highway, those properties, are they in the city limits or are they still in the county? Lusk's property, Paramount Antiques, the storage units, are they in the city limits?
If we
been annexed, or are they in the county?
If you can see this pink line here, I don't know whether it shows up very well on the screen, but beginning here along Kellogg and then turning and going north on 135th, it goes all the way up to the northwest corner there of Miss Hall's property here. Then it goes over to the angled line, angles down to that point, comes down here, back west, and then runs down south, and then starts going back east. So all of this area inside here is in the county. Everything to the east, north, and west would be in the city.
Do you believe that the reason it's not annexed is because of the large acreage and it can't be unilaterally annexed? Is that, can you suppose that?
The city has not for many years done unilateral annexations.
Okay. So
There
even
were-
though it's contiguous on the east side there, they've not done anything with that.
Right. Like I said, for probably 15 or 20 years, basically the city's policy has been to wait for development where they want services or need something from the city where they could ask for annexation as part of the arrangement to provide that service.
Going west along Highway 54, although all that commercial is in the city limits.
Yes, it appears so. The line kind of disappears over here, but I believe that to be true.
So all of our subject property to be considered and most of the protest is in the county. It's never been brought into the city, but everything surrounding it is in the city. Is that correct?
I guess I'm a little confused. Most of the protests are in the city, except for...
No, well, most of the legal protest that's in the thousands.
Oh, yes, I see, yes. The majority of it, yes.
Now, on the south side of Kellogg, or Highway 54, how much of that is in the city?
Well, if you start here where the arrow is and go north to this point and then back west to there and then go south, this area right in here is part of a platted property that is in the city. This area here going down to the half-mile line, I believe, is all in the county and to the west. Because as you recall, you had that apartment project about a half a mile south there.
Well, one of my concerns has been, as I've tried to analyze this, is that we've taken a standard for an event center that is clearly way out in the county, in a very rural area, and tried to apply that in an area that is more urban than rural. And I think that's a false assumption in the very beginning, because I would believe that we should hold part of our responsibility is to understand where the city's growing and hold some standards that would be more urban than rural, as opposed to more rural than urban. Because I think that's going to cause problems down the road for what happens with this property, as far as zoning, as far as utilities, as far as infrastructure. And so I think we started at a place where I would not have started. I would have suggested that we make it a more urban viewpoint with paved parking, with other amenities, landscaping, signage, as opposed to rural. Having said that, that horse has already run out of the barn, so talk about a little bit about traffic. I worry about if there's only one entrance, what does that do to fire protection? In many places where we have large areas like this, our fire department says you have to have two entrances into the property, so that if one is blocked or the whatever reason, they have other accesses. It doesn't look like there's going to be any other access except off of 135. And at this point, I assume that's in the fire district.
I assume that it was in the fire district as well. The recommendation from the Planning Commission is that that this be approved subject to plating within 1 year. And as part of the plating process, the traffic engineer, the appropriate traffic engineer, will review the access points and come up with whatever needs to be, and the fire department would be involved in that. And if they felt like they needed two access points, that would be part of the conditions of approval of the plat, along with drainage as well.
Okay, well, it just looks to me problematic that you could ever get a second entrance. It's not going to be right beside the other entrance.
Well, certainly the engineers have their access management guidelines that they employ, and would, if there was needed to be a second one, they would take a look at it and make sure that it matched up with driveways across the street and any other safety issues that come up as a result of creating a new access point.
Do you happen to know the the touch point of where you'd have to have pressurized water to sprinkle the event center for the occupancy that's going to be in that building?
No, I don't know the answer to that.
When does that come up?
According to the staff report, and I guess Russ can confirm, they're going to renovate these buildings, and I presume that as part of the renovation, they would have to submit building plans, and that the fire department would review those plans as part of their review and make sure that fire suppression is appropriate.
Sedgwick County would review those because it's still in the county.
MABCD, yes.
We've had other event centers that we turned down because they would not sprinkle with pressurized water their event center.
That's correct.
And we're going to let this go until at some point later, a year from now, there's a filing for a plat. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, they wouldn't be able to operate until the plat is recorded, if that's the question.
So all of this could unravel if they're not willing to put in a pressurized system.
If they cannot get the plat recorded, then the zoning would not be published and would not become effective.
And today they're on well water?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And well water cannot be used for a pressurized sprinkler system in any kind of a building. Is that correct?
Well, what I understood from discussions were the ones that I know in other places, that one of the things that they can do is create pressurized tanks, elevated tanks with a minimum amount of water that's on site that the fire department can connect to, and that's generally why they don't end up doing it, is because that's too expensive. But there are, as I understand, there are engineered ways to create the pressure necessary if you have enough volume of water.
Okay. The wastewater treatment for this right now is on-site. It's not lagoon. It's an on-site system. And is it adequate for a building that will perform for 350 and plus people? Because you could have people outside. It's just the building that's restricted to 300 people. The restrooms and the wastewater treatment could be 1,000 people.
I talked with the folks at MABCD, and they tell me they have approved the existing advanced wastewater system on the site and that they will monitor it for its effectiveness, and I presume that should it come up short, then they would issue notices to have it corrected and meet the minimum codes.
Was the wastewater system developed for a church that usually is used maybe at some capacity twice a week?
I didn't really ask that question. I would make that assumption that that's what they sized it for.
And that would be a different volume of flow than an event center that could go 7 days a week with many times over what the church could uphold?
I think the potential is that it could be a lot more active as the proposed use rather than as opposed to a church, yes.
Okay. My last thing is the parking. I have a problem with not having paved parking and landscaping that would fit the nature of the neighborhood where people have invested a lot of money themselves in their residences and in the common areas into the entryways to keep in with the suitable flow of the surrounding neighborhood. So I think, an all-weather parking, to me, needs to be built into this somehow. I know it adds cost, but if they're really truly going to go into business, then sometimes you have to invest to make your business work. I think those are all my questions right now. I have a little consternation on some of this. Not that an event center in a certain manner couldn't work there, but I think we started with a false assumption that it was going to be in a more rural area, and very quickly this is not a rural area, it's a more urban area. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner PETERJOHN.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question. Question about notification and proper notification of the people who would be able to would be affected was raised as an issue. From the planning department's perspective, do you feel like the notification issue has been handled, and of course, especially in light of this public hearing and public discussion today?
I can tell you our standard process, and then certainly the legal department can speak to the specifics of this if you want those. Our typical process is, in order to make sure that nobody could argue that the applicant or staff somehow manipulated the ownership list in favor one way or another, the applicants are required to go to a title company because they're presumed to be neutral and have no interest one way or the other. Go to a title company, get the certified ownership list from the title company for the specified distance. In this case, it was 1,000 feet. We then mail individual notice to the individual property owners based on that list. If there's an error in that list, we have no way of knowing that, and we just mail them out based on the title company, because the theory is that the title companies have the best, most up-to-date names and addresses of property owners, and so that's why we use the title company, and so that's how we do every case. I'll let legal staff address the particulars of this one.
Justin Wagoner, Assistant County Counselor. And Commissioner PETERJOHN, I believe your question was for Dale was regarding the sufficiency of the notice. A couple points. The first is...
My reason for raising it was there was some public comment that there were questions about it, and I wanted on the record to kind of make sure we had a clarification of where we stood on legal notification, Mr. Wagner.
Correct. First, I would say that the issue wasn't sufficiently raised that it necessarily has to be fully addressed, because there wasn't any specific party name that was not receiving notice, nor any address. However, we did look into the issue. It's our office's opinion that the notice was sufficient in this case. The only property in the 200-foot required area, or any other areas greater than 200 feet that may have been required, that allegedly didn't receive notice, actually did receive notice to the proper suite number. It was one of the Perfection signature company, I believe it was, to Suite 112. They were on the property list. Any of the other claimed non-receipt of notice properties were actually advisory notices that are not required.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one small question for Director Miller. Can you tell us the history of the southern 25 acres on its zoning history? Was it zoned GC a long time ago, or was this something that happened recently? Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
According to the staff report, we couldn't find any cases that showed how this property got zoned to GC, so the only thing I can assume is that it was done as part of a large area rezoning, which doesn't require individual notice and may have been done as what we would call a DER case. But as far as I know, this is that zoning's been there for quite some time.
Can you give me how about 20 years ago? Was it likely to be GC 20 years ago?
It may have been part of the 1958 rezoning. In 1958, the Planning Commission went 3 miles outside the then existing city limits and rezoned a number of properties located to the intersection of section line roads or section line roads and highways, and rezoned areas just by using a standard distance. For example, we refer to that map as the checkerboard map because a lot of them, each intersection corner has a 600 by 600 square of limited commercial zoning, kind of like a checkerboard. Not all of them were that way. Because this cuts through an ownership, I would assume that it was done as part of a larger area where they really weren't looking at the ownership pattern. They were just granting zoning based on what they thought was appropriate given its location.
Okay, but the point of this is that zoning has not changed that we know of in at least 20 years.
Not that I'm aware of.
Can you just verify that a church is allowed, in fact, to build their property into an SF20? Are they allowed? It's interesting to me this church was constructed on the south side of that line between the 15 acres and the 25 acres. It's just to the south of that line. But they could have moved that building to the north into the SF-20 without too much trouble. I mean, there's lots of churches in residential parts of the community. Is there some reason why are they restricted to the GC, or they could have built the church on the?
No, churches
the
are
side?
permitted in the SF-20 district by right. They are not allowed in the RR rural residential district by right. It requires conditional use. So I'm not sure why they chose to have the buildings just south of the north line of the general commercial, but the entire site would have been legal.
Okay. I guess I'm just making a point here that the buildings were constructed on the general commercial side of the land, not the single family residential part of the land. And so, again, I think if this was going to be sold to some new tenant, knowing what would be allowed there, that building theoretically could be used for all kinds of things in its position. And it sounds to me like they picked an interesting spot on the property, but had it been a little bit further to the north, then the only thing that could go there would probably be another church. But because of where it is, it could be almost anything. So, all right, that's interesting to me. All right, thank you, Mr. Miller.
I have some questions about the building. Oh, I'm a little confused. How long have these buildings been on this site? Maybe you don't know, or maybe
I believe Ms. Hall said 2007. Is that?
Those buildings finished. That's not true. They were buildings for.
So what I'm hearing is they were originally built as part of the Diamond W horse activity, and then apparently the church bought the property. I have heard two different things. Whether one is that the church never actually occupied the property; they just owned it. But I don't know if that's true.
Is Mr. Eby, can he speak to that, or?
I don't think I have any better information than Mr. Miller does as to the age of the structures, but they've been there for at least, I think, again, somebody said the 1990s. I would say at least that long. There was some mention in the Planning Commission minutes that this was another kind of entertainment venue way back in the day. As far as the church occupying it, my impression is that the church has never occupied this for services other than maybe some ancillary recreational type of services, but it's never, in my estimation, been used as a church.
So is the building basically vacant?
That's my understanding, yes.
And do you know for about how long? I mean, for a while then.
I would say at least since Ms. Hall sold it in 2007.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, commissioners, what's the will of the board? Maybe we should speak to our counselors and say, what are our options?
Hello again. At this point, you've got a number of different options. Really, there's three that could be mentioned. The first would be to take the recommended action, either approving it as is or approving with modifications the zoning change that's been put forth. The second, and that would require a vote of 4 commissioners. It requires a 3/4 majority. The second option would be to return this back to the Planning Commission, along with considerations that you would like them to take into account. That would require 3 commissioners to vote in favor of that option. And the third option would be to vote to deny the zone change. In this case, that would again require a 3-vote majority.
And okay. And are we under a time constraint to make a decision? Do we have to do that today? Can it be postponed or tabled, or?
There would not be any time constraint that I can see at this point, although I may defer to Dale Miller if he had any thoughts on that.
So the only thing I was clarifying is to override the Planning Commission, it takes a 2/3 vote to deny. But what was the question? I'm sorry.
Do we have to decide this today? Could we delay this decision for some time, or are we under a time constraint? Is there
No, you have the option to, if you think there's information that's missing or needs to be clarified and you want it clarified before you make a final motion, certainly that's within your authority.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner PETERJOHN?
Yeah, my understanding was, in the sheet I've gotten, there was a proposed motion handed that we had two options, that finding that notice was sufficient, and the second option was finding that notice for the properties was insufficient, and then returning, if we find it's insufficient, returning this to the MAPC for a new hearing.
And I apologize,
Would you
Commissioner
clarify
PETERJOHN.
for that, because you kind of gave us the options that go in terms of actually moving forward with the substance, but I wanted to clarify in terms of the notification. Do we have to make a motion on notification before we take?
I do
any
not
other
believe that's necessary in this case because I don't think it was raised sufficiently. That was prepared in anticipation of it being raised more specifically than it was.
action? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Unruh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I really not a big fan of deferrals, but in this particular situation, I think that for my satisfaction, I would like to send this back to the Planning Commission and ask them to give us specific recommendations on paving the parking lot and whatever that includes. And also, I'd like to have a specific recommendation from the Planning Commission on the height of berming around it that we've talked. So that's, I'm not making a motion, I'm just saying that's my preference.
I'll also say that we've been given this picture of this, as well as someone's given us some signatures. I'll ask that all of that be entered into the record. I'll give this to you, Madam Clerk, when we're done, okay? So that we make sure everything's entered in. So, Commissioner PETERJOHN?
Well, thank you. I want to get all the documents into the record, and particularly the petitions. And there's a lot of things that came out in this hearing today, and I'm in the position where I want to make sure that we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. And so for the record, I'd like to get in and state that I've had a lot of communications from people in various forms, and whether it's by talking to people by phone, I've tried to return a lot of phone calls, and I have to apologize. I just ran out of time to get a hold of everybody, and I will try and get back with folks, but I did receive a lot of phone calls and a lot of communication, and I have received the final briefing from staff yesterday afternoon, so I'm trying to be in full compliance with the rules that we have to follow in the zoning cases, and tried not to bring anything up prior to this point, so that we are following the golden rules and the procedures that have been talked about for handling these cases. And I agree that there's a lot of loose ends here, which I alluded to in my comments earlier. I would agree that, you know, this is much more closer to an urban situation than, say, a rural situation. I would also add that I believe that each zoning case it's like, as some other folks have told me, it's like storms coming into the community. When the weather changes, each storm is unique, and I think each zoning case is unique. So we throw out there. I'd also throw out a number of other points that, you know, we had a lot of discussion about 135th Street, and the one thing that I would say, having looked at the arterial streets, and 135th Street is one of those, the city of Wichita, which is nearby, has changed around the arterial streets a whole bunch of different ways, in terms of, and mostly expanding, widening them, taking them to 4 lanes, now 5 lanes, and sometimes they leave them 2, sometimes they make them wider. That's a decision for our elected colleagues across the street to make. I like Commissioner Unruh, I'm reluctant in some ways to want to second guess what the work of the Planning Commission, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out how many loose ends that have come up in front of me since we got started here. So I am very uncomfortable with having this proceed, because I think in terms of the some of the specific golden rules, having dialogue, I believe, just among the 5 of us now. I can go into more detail, Mr. Chairman, if we get to that point or not, but I do think that there are a lot of questions and the discussion about gravel versus paved, and frankly other things that I think need to be that are very problematical with the proposal that's in front of us today, and I'll leave it at that at this point. Thank you.
Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to disclose my ex parte communication as a beginning point here. I did have someone named Gerald Seibel and Patrick Matson who visited me in my office advocating for me to oppose this. Somebody named Sandra Phillips called, Cheryl Gum, Patricia Beyer, Kathy Eck, Marta Merrill, Kendra Lyncher, somebody named Sam, I can't read his last name, I couldn't understand his last name. I had a 3-page document from Greg Ferris, as well as I have emails from Calvin Simmons and Ron Lane, I guess, that also called, and an email from Dale Weir, that's a W-E-I-R, and finally Kirk and Janet, I will spell the last name, S-C-H-I-E-B-E-L-H-U-T, also wrote a nice email. So that's the folks that have contacted me. I will disclose, I think, everybody that talked with me was opposed. With respect to the golden rules, that is probably the one that stands out as that there has been a large opposition to this, and I would admit that is clearly true. As I read the golden rules, however, I would say most of these, I think, I guess I would disagree with some of the analysis that has been presented here today. I think there's actually, I don't want to go through these right now as I'm not sure where this is headed, but should we have a chance to vote on this at some point soon, I would probably go through this with a fine-tooth comb and make comments about each and every one of these golden rules. But I guess right now, I guess I disagree with much of the analysis about these rules, and I probably would take the opposite side for various reasons. In fact, I would ask, I guess, I don't know if it sounds like we may be deferring this, and I'm not sure if that's where we're going right now, but if that happens, I would ask to make sure the homeowners understand that the PUD actually does restrict the use. Right now, you're very vulnerable to what could happen in this property, and it sounds like it's been for sale for a long time. They're looking for a tenant, and someone could very easily buy this and put it in a mobile home park. They could buy this and put it in a car lot or other things that you might be opposed to. So to me, knowing this is primarily going to be used for an entertainment venue, I used to be a wedding photographer. I did that for almost 20 years, and I attended literally hundreds of weddings. And I tell you what, for the most part, they've been great events. I can think of one time where I think things got a little bit out of hand. At that particular wedding, there was a uniformed law enforcement officer there that was hired by the wedding party to make sure things went well, and it was fine. But for the most part, the wedding venues have not been as bad as has been described here. About someone mentioned things about underage drinking, fighting, littering, harassment, and a bunch of other terms that were used. I just find that to be not in agreement with what I have seen at these weddings. And, you know, there are other uses for this that can be done here on this property, but it's not going to be something that happens every single day, all day long. There's going to be events from time to time, and I guess if I owned a home in the area, I would much rather have something like that limits its use, that I think is hopefully a good neighbor to the community versus something that we really don't want. And I want to make sure the people who sign these petitions understand that they are very vulnerable as it sits right now without taking any action whatsoever today. The PUD, in my opinion, limits the use extensively. We can add more restrictions as well. And I would suppose if this gets delayed, that might be one of our discussions we need to have, is what other restrictions should be added to the list that's already on the PUD. There's quite a few restrictions already. It sounds like the proponent is amiable to adding some additional restrictions, if that makes sense. So I guess I view this as something we ought to not reject outright. We ought to continue to work on it. I am generally in favor of property rights, and the fact is this is an area that has not had a use, it sounds like, for about 8 years. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of empty buildings throughout the city of Wichita that are blight. And I guess if I owned a home of the caliber that's in this neighborhood, I would not want to see an empty building sitting there for 8 years, and who knows how much longer it will sit there. So I guess, to me, this is an opportunity for the community to I guess, be thoughtful about what would be the reasonable list of restrictions. If it's landscaping we need, if it's a paved parking lot we need, that's a good discussion to have. But I guess the majority of this is a lot of the not my backyard arguments, worried about all kinds of things that have not been substantiated throughout the entire city of Wichita. There's other venues around that are similar to this that have not experienced the long list of negative criteria that was listed here today. So I guess I'm willing. I'm just kind of on the fence right now, trying to figure out what we should do. It sounds like a deferral might be in order here, or delay. Send this back to MAPC. But generally speaking, I say the golden rules generally, I think, in my opinion, do support the proponent. I'll stop with that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Commissioner Unruh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, for the record, I'd also express that I've had some communication by email and telephone from a variety of folks, most of whom Commissioner Howell identified, that had not made up my mind or made any sort of comments indicating what my inclination was until we got to the discussion today. But in light of our discussion, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we return this case to the MAPC for further consideration of matters that relate specifically to the hard surface of the parking lot and the height of the berm and whatever other pertinent recommendations that Director Miller might have gleaned from this conversation and this discussion. I don't know if that's specific enough, but that's my motion.
Okay. Just to clear, you're not asking for a specific decision to be made, but just for them to address those issues and respond.
That's correct.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any questions or comments? Commissioner Norton?
Just real quick, I'd like to declare that I did have some ex parte communication through email and some phone messages. I didn't talk to anyone personally.
Commissioner Howell?
Just a clarification, if we send this back to MAPC today, when it comes back to us the next time, assuming that they approve it again, maybe with some changes, but the next time this comes back to us, it only requires 3 votes to deny or approve in that case, whereas today it takes 4 votes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so.
No?
That's not correct.
So next time it comes back to us, what's the requirement?
Because the protest exists, it will still be the 3/4 majority.
To approve?
Yes.
But to deny would only be 3 votes?
Yes.
And today it's 4 votes either direction we go, with the exception of sending it back to MAPC?
Yes.
Okay. So that's my only question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Commissioner PETERJOHN?
I'm going to segue on that I did, besides the communications I heard earlier, Mr. O'Borney did meet with me, and I did have telephone communications, and want to get that clarification onto the record in terms of the communications that I had. Having said this, I think basically there are a lot of other problems besides the ones that Commissioner Unruh have identified in terms of going back to, in terms of that were mentioned, and but even with those, I still think we've got some systemic problems with this proposal and its form, and I'd have a lot of problems with it, even if we just take care of the parking lot and whatever discussion or whatever the Planning Commission might come back with berming. But having said that, we're still going to, with the clarification from staff that it's still because of the where it's treated overall. I do think the golden factors. There's a lot of problems here with this proposal as it currently is, and I realize on the GC that potential is out there. I'd also be remiss if I didn't point out there's a whole bunch of other locations where you have arterial streets touching Kellogg. I can think of a couple offhand where you might have similar situations where there is a general commercial zoning, and they're undeveloped and have been for quite a while. So I don't find that discussion persuasive in and of itself. I think we're going to end up, if we do send this back to the Planning Commission, we'll have another hearing like the one we've had today. I don't know if the public will turn out strongly today, but I think the issues before us will largely be the same. So I will support sending this back to the Planning Commission, but I still think that there are some systemic problems here that are going to make this difficult going forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Howell.
Just wanted to disclose on the record one more time. I missed a couple of names for the expert communication. I also had voicemails from Kent Owen, Carol Bellis, and Fred and Shirley Parker. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I also received emails, phone calls, and communications from the same people everyone else has. I'll be supportive of sending this back, although for the record I'll say I'm not as concerned about the berms and the parking as perhaps some of my commissioners are. You know, I look at this. We have a building that already exists. It's empty and been vacant for years, and we want to encourage economic development. It's in a general commercial area, and I have to agree with Commissioner Howell that, I mean, a lot of other things that are more intensive could be built here that would be, that if I lived in the area, that I'd rather have this event center there than some of the other things that could be there. So you got to have a very high bar to tell somebody that they can't use their property, and it's already authorized to do things a lot more intensive, so it's difficult for me to see why we would turn something down that's less intensive. And as far as berming, they are putting a berm up. They've already used the dirt and run that to the north, perhaps. And I'm fine with that. But I'm skeptical or hesitant to want to increase the cost for development on a building that's already empty and has been vacant for a number of years. Especially when we talk about berming to the north. I mean, to the north we have some land that is in the floodplain, and you know, I guess I'm not sure how much of a difference. It's not bermed now. There's not going to be any new buildings built. There is going to be a pond, an outdoor area, and some parking. I'm not sure it's necessary to have a whole lot of berming to separate that from an area that's a floodplain. Now, I know there are houses that are further north than that, but if all you're doing is building a pond, adding an outdoor rec area, and a parking lot, I'm not sure. You got several hundred feet distance, and I'm hesitant to increase the cost. I'm not sure it's going to make much difference. As far as the gravel parking lot, I guess that's not a big issue for me. We have a gravel parking lot at the Extension Center, and you know, there's businesses and people all around there. Not to mention the fact you have open fields here and dirt all around. I'm not sure that's going to cause dust is going to be a big problem, considering the large setback areas that are existing, which is a lot more than what a lot of the other event centers and stuff in the past. So anyway, those are. I'm generally inclined, I guess, to support this. That being said, I understand some of the concerns, but in the end, this is a much less intensive use than what could be already done by right. And so, like I say, I appreciate everyone coming out and talking. Now, I live in an area that has a strip club to the north and a dump to the west, so I understand why people will show up and have some concerns. But in this particular area, with the amount of space that's around there, that's kind of why I come down on that end. But that being said, I'm more than happy to support a motion to send it back and have the Planning Commission consider these items and work with the applicant and see what they can come up with. So my biggest concern is I don't want to put so many restrictions on this that it becomes cost prohibitive and then we have no economic development at all. And we talk about jobs, we talk about economic development, we talk about property rights. You have an opportunity there to use a building that's already there, which is, and I go back, it's a really big factor in that it's a lot less intensive than a Walmart or a Sam's or a bunch of other stuff that could be put in there. So, but that being said, I'll be supportive of this motion. Commissioners, is there anything else? Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Chairman Ransah.
Aye. That passes 5-0. Thanks, everybody, for your patience and coming in and speak today.
Thank you.
Commissioner Norton?
Before everybody leaves, we weren't time specific as to when this would come back from the Planning Commission. So if you're interested in staying attached, please follow our website or get us a couple of people that can call our office consistently to find out when it'll be back on an agenda, because we weren't specific on the date. It's going to go to the MAPC and then at some point come back to us. And that's not time specific. So if you still have an interest, 2 weeks, a month from now, please stay attached to us, because there won't be another notice going out that I know of. Is that correct, Dale?
Because we'll have to work with the applicant in order to get revisions to the Planning Commission for them to consider. What we probably would do is send out new notices for the Planning Commission date, and then this typical practice is folks that sign up or speak at the Planning Commission, we send them a follow-up letter saying the date that it's going to be heard by the County Commission.
I just think it's important to make sure that we give them the opportunity to stay connected to the issues if they were here today.
Thanks again, everybody. And we're going to take a 5-minute recess so we can take a break.
12:05.
what you're into.
No, he wants to leave before.
So is Betty White.
All right, we're now back from recess, and we'll go ahead and Madam Clerk move on to the next item.
New business, item C, agreement with Central Plains Regional Healthcare Partnership, Sedgwick County Board of County Commissioners, and the City of Wichita to partner with the Sedgwick County Health Department under the Project Access Program.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Board of Health. Adrienne Brunlutz, Health Director. Before you this afternoon is an agreement with Central Plains Healthcare Partnership, Sedgwick County Commissioners, City of Wichita, to partner with the Sedgwick County Health Department under the Project Access Program. Project Access was created in 1999 and is a partnership program that coordinates access to donated medical care for uninsured, low-income Sedgwick County residents who fall below 250% of the federal poverty guideline. Eligible uninsured residents are enrolled for limited periods of time to address immediate medical needs. Once enrolled, patients have access to a variety of specialists as well as prescription medications, durable medical equipment, and diabetic supplies. In 2015, Project Access served approximately 1,400 patients, and these numbers are approximate because we requested and received the information mid-December, so it's 2 weeks shy of a whole year, plus medical claims are still coming in. In 2015, they recruited 35 new physicians to participate in the program, donated hospital care valued at over $8 million so far, donated physician care valued at $2,500,000 thus far, and provided approximately $450,000 in purchased and donated medications, as well as purchased $24,000 in medical equipment for patients. Funding for Project Access will come from a variety of sources, including the City of Wichita, Sedgwick County, United Way, as well as private contributions and then planned fundraisers. If approved, the 2016 allocation of $175,000 will be used to fund a portion of several positions, as well as pay for prescriptions and durable medical supplies. I ask you approve this agreement and authorize the chairman to sign. And Ann Nelson with Project Access is here if you have any questions that I can't answer.
Commissioner Peterjohn?
Yes, I saw when it said basically 250% of federal poverty guidelines, so just to make sure I understand this right, if, let's say, a federal poverty guideline is $15,000 a year for a family of four, at 250%, then that'd be anybody with an income family of four, a level of $37,500 a year or less would be eligible to participate in this program. Am I correct in that type of calculation?
Yes, yes.
And is that a reasonable ballpark? And I'm maybe, if I don't want to put Ms. Nelson too much on the spot, but just
she said you are very close. Yes,
I'm pretty close in
yes.
terms of the rate and the amount. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand that Project Access has done some additional fundraising this last year. Can you talk about the fundraising and success in doing that? Do we have some numbers on that?
Yes. In 2012, the fundraising was started, and they raised $30,000. In 2013, it was $41,000. 2014, $40,000. 2015, $120,000. And then they're looking at needing to raise, because of some reductions in other funding, $202,500 in 2016.
Does any of that money come from the Kansas Health Foundation?
They received one-time funding from Kansas Health Foundation in 2014 of $50,000.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. I am curious. This program was started roughly 16 years ago, and since then we have a federal government that's coming up with the Affordable Care Act. Is this program still as necessary as it was back in 1999? Can you talk about why is this I think there's government solutions and there's charitable solutions in the community, and both are at play here. I'm just curious why the government solution's in place and it's fully implemented at this point. What's the importance of Project Access now?
There are still even though many more people are insured, there are still a lot of, and possibly more, underinsured because of the selections of policies that people can choose. They may still have a very high deductible. Their payments of going to the physician may be prohibitive and not be able to afford what medical care that they need. Anne, would you add?
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Nelson with Central Plains Healthcare Partnership, which administers the Project Access Program. And I appreciate the opportunity to answer your question, Commissioner, because it's the one I get the most often. People eligible for subsidies within the Affordable Care Act marketplace are at about 135% to 175% federal poverty level. Those under 135% of federal poverty level, the original legislation was designed in the ACA was designed for people to enroll in expanded Medicaid. Now, about 25 states in our country have elected not to do that. So people up to 135%, from 0 to 135% federal poverty level, are not eligible for any support through Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act. We serve a significant population of people at that income level. There are some who are eligible for subsidies within the federal marketplace. We are navigating those folks. We've enrolled roughly 200 people who were enrolled in Project Access, now have purchased insurance. But the subsidies go down more sharply than the income rises as you move along that scale. So people at about 175 up to 250% have very little available to them. Insurance, which is actually managed by the private marketplace, and the costs in any particular state are based on the marketplace of insurance providers and what they charge, where people are not eligible for a lot of support above about 175% of federal poverty level. So we're meeting a need that federal programs and other programs are not providing. It's still essential. And these are hardworking people who install tile for a living, or they're finishing college, or serving food at restaurants, or putting up roofs and helping build new houses as subcontractors. So my answer to you is yes, it's still very much needed.
Okay, good answer. Just another comment, and I'm ready to vote on this. I am supportive of the motion or the agenda item today. I'll be supporting this with a yes vote today. But just a comment, we received some criticism this last year because of our budget process, and there was a small reduction from last year to this year. I think we did $200,000 last year. It was two action items, but all together was $200,000 last year, if I remember correctly. And this year it's $175,000, and so assuming budget pressures continue to happen, I just I made a comment. I made comments before. I'll make the same comment again. That is that organizations that are heavily dependent on government for a large portion of their funding revenue stream are at risk. I guess the fundraising is going up, and I'm glad to see that. I think it's very good that Project Access is trying to raise more funds to the private sector through fundraising efforts, and I think that's very, very commendable. And I think you're doing a great job with that. I hope that will continue. I anticipate additional pressures on our budget to continue to fund at this level. I would be surprised if we were able to keep up even 175 in the next fiscal year, but we'll see what happens when we see our estimates come forward. But I guess just as a general comment that anybody who is heavily dependent on government for a large portion of their revenue stream is at risk. And then that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Unruh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment that the overwhelming majority of your program is donated through the medical community. It's in the millions of dollars every year, so this is a very small portion of the total program of Project Access. And I just want to compliment you on, Adrian, you read us all those numbers of services provided, and that's, can't remember them all, but very impressive of the benefit that's brought to our community. So thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the agreement and authorize the chair to sign.
Second.
Commissioner Norton?
Ann, if you'd step forward. I've been very supportive of Project Access. I still am. I still think it's a safety net for many, many of the people in our community to keep them healthy and working and raising their families. When we talk about government intrusion on this, we put a very small amount in compared to the whole program. Over the 16 years, how much donated physician, pharmaceutical, and hospital care has been donated in our community?
For almost 13,000 people we've served since 1999, we've leveraged over $180 million in donated care, an additional $10 million in prescription support for patients.
I think that's pretty significant for our community for what little bit of investment the county has made in the program. So thank you very much. That's all I have to share.
I'll say this was approved in our budget. I'll be supportive of this action today. That being said, I've said in the past that I believe this program is too important to be dependent on the government. It can and should be funded by the private sector. I'll also point out, as Commissioner Howell said, this came up in our budget process, and a lot of people wanted to criticize the Sedgwick County. However, the city of Wichita is also reducing their payments to Project Access by $25,000. United Way has reduced their contribution by $20,000. United Methodist Health Ministries has reduced their contribution by $10,000, and there's no public outrage against any of that. So I just want to point out that. And specifically, Kansas Health Foundation is giving nothing. This is an organization that says it cares about the health of Kansans, and that's its mission. It has over $500 million in assets, and its CEO makes over $400,000 a year, yet they say they cannot help support this organization, which is deserving. I've seen some of the grants they give to people for some of the issues that they do. There's no doubt in my mind that Project Access is much more deserving of their funding than many of the things that they support. They really seem to be more inclined to get more people dependent upon government than actually supporting programs like this. It's very disappointing. It's another form of progressive hypocrisy, and I would encourage them to step up and put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and start funding Project Access like it can and should in the future. Because, like I say, this is too important of a program to be dependent upon government funding when all governments have revenue incomes. And I've also heard from a variety of nonprofits out there who have to do their own fundraising, and they kind of resent the fact that certain nonprofits here in the community get government support and taxpayer support while the vast majority do not, and they see that as being unfair. That being said, the fact that we're reducing funding to Project Access does not mean Project Access will go away, because I am confident that the private sector can and would step up and fund private access in the full amount that it needs to continue. So that being said, I understand not everyone agrees with me, and we'll have to agree to disagree on that. It's not our disagreement is not about the work that Ann and others do, but it's about the proper way to fund this. So, Commissioner PETERJOHN.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be supportive of the motion today, but would point out the fact that there is a possibility, and I hope it does not happen, but it could happen, if we change how the distribution of the 1 cent countywide sales tax, instead of 75% roughly going to the 20 incorporated municipalities that are entirely or in part in Sedgwick County, if that percentage was changed, there'd be a whole bunch of programs that could be at risk going forward, and I'm afraid with the budgetary challenges that we're facing, we could have problems in the future, and that's one of the reasons why I'm glad to see that this commission is unified in terms of supporting efforts to keep the current allocation system in place. But I think it's wise to plan ahead, and that if the current statute is changed, I think that there could be some future changes, and I'd like Ms. Nelson or anyone else who's involved with the program to make sure that they're aware that counties could be facing some significant financial challenges going forward if a large part of existing revenues get removed from Sedgwick County on the sales tax. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Chairman Ransall.
Aye. Motion passes
Thank
5-0. Thank you, Ann, for being patient. I know we had a long hearing before your item. Thank you. Next item, please.
Item D, review of service plan, City of Derby annexation, resolution 30-2015.
Thank you, John Von Atchen, Assistant County Counselor. We are here today to review the service plan for Derby's proposed annexation of the Huckleberry addition to Sedgwick County. Under County Resolution 19012, upon notice of the proposed general annexation and the receipt of the service plan, County Counselor's Office is tasked with distributing that plan to the Commission and to the various county departments that are interested. There is a comment period of 14 days. That comment period closed December 14th, and we received 2 responses from the various departments, one from MAPD and one from Finance. Both did not find any issue with the proposed service plan. County Counselor's Office also fielded discussion from the Commission regarding the service plan. The proposed annexed area is the area here at the bottom of the map in red. There is a line on the eastern and the eastern edge on the south half of the property. That is the area that is currently adjacent to Derby city limits. And then the purpose of the review here today is that should the City of Derby proceed with annexing the property, in 3 years this board will review the service plan to see that the service plan that was proposed has been met. I stand for any questions. Additionally, from the City of Derby, City Planner Cody Bird and City Administrator Kathy Stexon are present and can also answer any questions of the board.
Are there any questions right now for John? Seeing none, even though this is not a public hearing, I will ask if anyone from the public would like to speak on this. Seeing none, I'll ask if anyone from the City of Derby would like to speak or no. Okay. Any questions or comments from Commissioner? Commissioner Peterjohn?
Yes, I do have a question for the city manager, if she'd be willing to come to the podium. I noticed that there's a road up on the northeast corner of this property. As part of the plan, obviously the streets that are within the annexed area would be streets within the area designated would go into the City of Derby. Are the street that's adjacent to this property, is that also going to be annexed into the City of Derby under the service plan?
Under this plan, no. Just the subdivision of Huckleberry is included, as noted in the red lines. But Oliver Street, beside this subdivision, is a township road maintained by the township. We are in communication with the township in terms of partnership on taking care of that road, and certainly the City of Derby would consider that for future annexation. It didn't make sense to include it with this one because this is a separate platted subdivision, and if this annexation goes through, then it would make sense to annex Oliver. It wouldn't have made sense if this didn't go through.
Okay, because I'm just, one of the concerns I have is when I think the township, the figures I've seen would end up losing, it's somewhere I think between $5,000 and $10,000 a year in township revenue if the annexation goes through, and if the road remains and it remains a township responsibility. I know state law requires municipalities, when they annex up to the road, they're supposed to annex the road too. So as part of the service plan, I wanted to kind of make sure I understood where things are at. And
I appreciate the question. We're certainly in compliance with state law, and we do have a good communication begun with Riverside Township about that road, and we'll see where that goes next.
well, There are a number of cases, unfortunately, here in Sedgwick County where municipalities have annexed up to the road but haven't annexed to the road. I've got some in my district, and that's nowhere near Derby, so just for the record, and I know you all have annexed a number of roads when you have annexed up to them, but I do think it's important to have some discussion, especially in a public matter and on these, on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to say I think Derby does a great job at the service plans. I think that I've heard lots of compliments over the years that Derby is probably the best municipality in the entire county with respect to doing a robust service plan and making sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, and just really everything has been thought of. Having said that, I have had an outpouring of, I'm sure you can imagine, an outpouring of people very concerned about this annexation. I just want to make some comments. But I've heard from those residents. I'd like to, and although I anticipate my assumption is that this is going to pass without any problems, but I would like to make some comments about the annexation itself, not necessarily about the service plan. I'm not sure that's acceptable or not, but I would like to at least make those comments, and hopefully that'll get communicated back to the Derby City Council. One of the comments I've heard a lot is that the township does a really good job of maintaining the streets within this community. I believe there are 63 homes.
Yes.
The total value of the homes, the assessed value of these homes is $16,394,590. The average value for each of these 63 homes is $260,231. They're going to see a 21% increase in property taxes as a result of this annexation, and with that. The street maintenance is one of those things that they're concerned about, because the land, as you leave the addition, goes uphill towards Oliver Street, and they're concerned about being able to get out of there during snowstorms and ice storms and that type of thing. And they know that the Riverside Township has done a very good job of maintaining. I'm sorry, Gypsum Township. Riverside. You were correct. I'm sorry. Riverside Township has done a good job of maintaining those. In fact, they say that. Many of the days that there's ice and snow, the roads are usually treated by 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and so they've had no problems. They're very pleased with that. This is a mature community that has built themselves up over the years. It is nearby Derby, and I know I heard one of the comments from one of the city council members saying that they thought it was an issue of fairness that these folks live right next to the city of Derby, enjoy all the amenities of the city itself, but not really paying city taxes. I guess the flip side of that argument would be that these folks also spend most of their money in the city of Derby and frequent businesses and things throughout the community, that the community itself benefits from their business. And so I would not want, I know we enjoy having people from outside our city come into the city to spend their money, and I'm sure that the city of Derby appreciates the dollars that are spent there in that community from this community. The spirit of annexation, I talked with a couple of the council members about this. I think the spirit of annexation is if you had an area just outside the city that was being annexed, that was platted and it was a subdivision that was platted, and the city wanted to annex the entire subdivision at one time to provide, curb and gutter, water, sewer, fire hydrants, and things like that. And to assess special assessment taxes to those homeowners, that would seem to be very reasonable. But to move into a mature community, and this community altogether is going to pay, let me see if I got it right here. I apologize for, oops, here it is. If I have done my calculations correct, the homeowners, 63 homeowners are together going to pay an additional $44,954 in taxes after this annexation. That's almost $45,000. The city of Derby is going to receive just under $90,000. No change to Sedgwick County government. We're not going to be impacted by this in any way, but our fire district is going to be impacted. We're going to see a reduction in revenue to the fire district by about $35,000, just under $35,000. Not that I care about this one too much, but the state library also, for whatever reason, sees a change of about a reduction of $2,100. And then finally, the township sees a reduction in revenue of just under $7,000. So there's a shifting of revenue from current jurisdictions that have responsibilities that isn't going to change significantly to the city of Derby of just about $90,000 to begin with. And with that, it's unclear exactly how that money would be spent and what services would be provided. As I read the service plan, everything that is being offered to this community is something they can get should they petition for those things. They can get street lights, they can get fire hydrants, they can get water and sewer and improved streets if they want them, but they have to pay for all of those things, and they're very content as things are. But as a going-in point, there is no additional services being provided to this community in any way that I can see that they're not going to have to pay for. Yet they're going to pay almost $45,000 in new taxes as a result of this annexation, and Derby gets just about $90,000 from this annexation. So having said that, I am concerned about the fact that these folks did not have a chance to elect those folks that are making this decision. The city council members, of course, live in the city and represent city people that elected them. The people that are being impacted by this decision live in the county, and they elected county commissioners, but they did not have any ability to elect those that are making this decision. So one of the arguments that has continued to come to me is that they're being annexed without representation that they have elected, and they're very concerned about that as well. So having said that, I really wish there was a way to, if there was something on the other side of Derby that made sense for them to develop and to bring into the city of Derby, I would understand this. But this is really a mature neighborhood that's been there for a very long time, and I'd just like to speak on behalf of those residents and encourage the city of Derby to vote no, to not do this. Now, having said that, we have no ability at our level to impact this decision directly. We can't vote on whether this should or should not happen. It's not our choice. All we're looking at today is the service plan itself. And as I said a minute ago, the service plan is very robust. It's very well done. So I will be supportive of the motion today, or the agenda item today, to approve the service plan. But I guess I am concerned about the annexation itself, and I would encourage the city of Derby to please not to do this. I've heard from the residents. I've heard no one in favor, and I don't. As far as an issue of fairness goes, I guess I see their side of this right now more than the city's, and so I would just encourage these comments to be communicated back to the city council, and hopefully they would be willing to acknowledge these points that have been clearly communicated to me numerous times by many residents, and I would hope that the city of Derby would slow this down or just drop it entirely. I will be making a motion if it's time to do that. Is it okay to make a motion now? Okay. I would make a motion.
I'll second the motion.
If I can find it. It's here somewhere. Here it is. I will make a motion to direct the county councilor to notify the city regarding any comments the board has regarding the plan, and to approve the review of this plan. Is that a sufficient motion?
Would the commission also like us to include any comments that we have received during the comment period, which includes from MAPD and finance?
I would like to amend my motion to include those comments as well.
Okay, thank you.
My second will reflect that too. And if I share Commissioner Howell's reservations, if I'm recognized, Mr. Chairman.
I'm done.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, I'll just repeat again that I share Commissioner Howell's reservations, but he has my second for his motion.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Chairman Ransall.
Aye. And that motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Cody and Kathy, thank you for being patient as well. I know it's been a long morning. Next item, please.
Item E, report of the Board of Bids and Contracts regular meeting on December 31st, 2015.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Joe Thomas, Purchasing Director. The Board of Bids and Contracts of December 31st resulted in 4 items that we're presenting to you this afternoon. Item number 1 is the Arkansas River Crossing 95th Street South Corridor Plan for Public Works. The recommendation is to accept the best proposal from Trans Systems Corporation, negotiated not to exceed $410,000. Pardon me. Item number 2 is capital leasing options for fire equipment acquisition for Sedgwick County Fire District number 1. The recommendation is to accept the low bid from U.S. Bancorp Government Leasing and Finance Incorporated and to execute an agreement for fire equipment financing based on the proposed rate for a term of 84 months. Item number 3 is AT&T Vesta Support Renewal for Emergency Communications. This recommendation is to accept the quote from AT&T Kansas in the amount of $208,502.50. And our final item, item number 4, which is the Electronic Monitoring Service, Department of Corrections. This is a recommendation to reject all the proposals submitted. This was originally brought to you, Commissioners, on December 9th, and this recommendation now is to reject the proposals, and they'll restart the process sometime early 2016. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have and recommend approval of these items.
Joe, I have some question probably for Dave Spears. Can you tell me about item number 1?
Yes, sir. David Spears, Director of Public Works. Item 1 is in the budget. It is for a corridor study for 95th Street South, which would include a bridge over the Arkansas River and making a better connection from east to west, or west to east, both, down in that area. There was a committee, well, more than a committee, Mulvane, Derby, Hayesville, and Wichita all agreed that it was a good idea to proceed with doing that. And it's felt that, well, we know that we need to have a study done on that to determine, look at all the bridges in the area and look at what's, how wide a road we need to put in. But this is going to, it's a very critical need for the future. This has actually been talked about since I've been here for 30 years, and WAMPO has also looked at it. It's in the long-range plan for them. Now, all of this money does come from the county. We will pay that, but I'd be glad to try to answer any other more specific questions you have.
And why did we not want to go with Parsons Brinkerhoff?
Okay, yeah, I don't want to get into real specifics on it. This was not a bid; it was a proposal. So they were not even on the short list. We had Trans Systems and Iteris on the short list. Parsons Brinkerhoff, they're a great company, and they're really great at our bridges. We sort of felt like that they had made some of the decisions ahead of time, which probably shouldn't have been made until we have more public input. And that was a thing that bothered us a little bit. The other thing that we really like about Trans Systems is that all of the folks there, they are teaming up with PEC on this project, and all of the folks are local. They're all local people working on this, and the other companies did not have. Not that that's the final factor, but we think the familiarity with the area is very important.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, Commissioners? Seeing none, what's the will of the board?
I move we approve the recommendations of the Board of Bids and Contracts.
Second.
Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Chairman Ransaw.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Next item, please.
Consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Scholes, County Manager. I recommend you approve consent agenda items Foxtrot through Oscar.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I second that, and I have a couple of comments when you're ready.
Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to point out on items F and on item G, I think it's a fairly significant change in what we estimated versus what is being estimated now, especially the MacArthur Arkansas River Bridge. Our original budget was, I believe, $1 million, and what we're seeing right now is an increase of more than $1 million. So the total project is $2,333,876.50. And I just think this is a significant change to our plan, and I guess it'd like to be noted that because we have limited funds in our road and bridge project fund, and I just wanted to point out this is a pretty significant hit. And then on item G, another $292,000 increase. So I just want the public to be aware of what we're voting on today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Clerk. Oh, do you want to speak to that, Dave? No.
Not unless you want me to, but I'll be glad to if you need more detail.
Go ahead.
I mean, on the MacArthur Bridge over the Arkansas River, and by the way, all these funds were taken out of 15 money. We're not behind in 16 with some projects that we saved money on in 15 is paying for this. But MacArthur, this is mainly a deck, and then we've had some scouring below, but this is not replacing the whole entire bridge. If you had to replace this entire bridge, and we would if we don't do this, it would be around, I'm just round numbers, $5 million at least to do it, whereas we'll get by for 2. Now, I agree with everything Commissioner House said, because one of the problems of why these came over, both of them, and we had others last year that did the same way with just decks, is because we had one company from Minnesota that was the low bidder on one of our bridges for bridge decks, and the local people are very busy. They've got interchange over Webb Road in Kellogg. They've got the interchange at I-235 in Kellogg. And so we know that was a factor in their bidding. That's why the bids came in higher than we expected. And both of these were designed by consultants, not just our staff, and they were just as surprised as we were when they came in over. So it's just the way it is, and the bids and how they came in. But still, it's better than having to replace the whole bridge there on MacArthur over the Arkansas River.
And we do need to get this done, so we can't really wait until all that bridge activity has subsided, and maybe we think we could get a better deal.
Yes, sir. There's a place in that bridge as a whole. You can see through the deck. So, and we've had the entire deck x-rayed so that we know exactly what's wrong and where. It's very extensive study that's been, and design that's been done on it.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner PETERJOHN.
Aye.
Chairman Ransall.
Aye. Next item is public agenda, which we have nobody in legislative issues, so we'll move to other. Commissioner, do you have anything for the other portion of this meeting? Commissioner PETERJOHN?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to have a little bit of a deja vu moment, but one of the important things that we try and do to keep this community safe, and during my first 4 years that I had the privilege of being a county commissioner, at this point in the other section of the meeting, I would give a brief update on the population in the Sedgwick County Jail. And as of this morning, population was 1,362 people in the sheriff's custody. Now that included, there were 147 who were out of county, but that also includes work release and then folks at the main facility. I mention this because we have our Criminal Justice Coordinating Council that does important work trying to keep this community safe, but do it at a reasonable price, work at alternative programs for folks who are misdemeanants, who, whether they're illegally rafting on the Arkansas River or have some other legal problems, we can try and come up with an alternative way of keeping them out. But to give you a frame of reference, at this time 6 years ago, on January 4th, 2010, population custody was 1,570 people. So by bringing those numbers down to over 200 people, I think that's an important way. And cost, sheriff's cost per person, we're talking about, and this is just the operating cost, not the capital cost, between $55 and $60 per day per prisoner. So I provide that just as a other factor that I think is relevant. And Mr. Chairman, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that January 6th was a very important day in American history. Sometimes we have sad things to report, but sometimes there were good too. In 1759, George Washington and Martha Dandridge Custis were married and had a long and successful, roughly 40-year marriage, and significant for future history and anybody who gets a chance to visit their home in Mount Vernon, very important. But on this date in 1838, we had a technological transformation. Samuel Morse demonstrated the viability over 2 miles of wire for the first telegraph. one of the first electromechanical devices ever created that were practical in a meaningful sense. Now, it took him 6 years to take it to Washington, where in the Supreme Court chambers a message was sent from Baltimore to Washington, and they used a line from the Bible, "What has God wrought?" as the message that was successfully sent. And of course, telegraph wires became a worldwide phenomenon thereon and started the electrical revolution that we're still living with today. So, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to just add that January 6th is an important day in American history.
Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't actually have any prepared remarks, but I'd like to speak from my heart for just a moment regarding the executive order from the President yesterday. As I read the Constitution, I continue to be surprised by what the administration does, and I don't normally speak like this from this bench very often, but I wanted to share just a couple of my thoughts today. As I read the Constitution, Article 1 says, "All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States." What the President did yesterday, in my opinion, was, in fact, legislation. I wondered where does the President get such authority to make such executive orders? And as I studied this a little bit, I found out that it comes from Article 3 of the Constitution. I'm sorry, Article 2 of the Constitution, Section 3. It's really a small phrase. It says, "He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed." And that is the phrase that gives the President authority to make such an executive order. Simply stated, what this means is the President has the responsibility to fill in the holes where Congress passes a law, and trying to implement that law sometimes requires some clarity and some direction, and the President has the right to do that. That would be a proper use of an executive order, but what he did yesterday, in my opinion, is unconstitutional. I spent a lot of time studying the Second Amendment and thinking about the Second Amendment and why this is important to the people that we represent. We took an oath to uphold the Constitution. I take that very seriously. The Second Amendment, let me just read it one more time. It says, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." The Kansas Constitution is clear that the citizens of Kansas have an individual right to bear arms. We changed our Constitution in 2010 with 89% of the vote, which I believe is a national record for any item in any state. I believe 89% is unprecedented on something such as this. But we have an individual right to bear arms. And then Justice Scalia, during the Heller decision, made very clear comments that the individual citizens of this country have the right to bear arms. And you reflect, there's been a lot of discussion about what does a well-regulated militia mean. Simply stated, as it's been interpreted by the Supreme Court, means that it's a well-trained citizenry. People have a responsibility to defend themselves, and I would say they really should do so. What I see this administration doing, in my opinion, is they show distrust of the people. I think the government needs to trust its people. And as the Founding Fathers wrote this, it was clear they didn't trust the government. It says, "Necessary for the security of a free state." The word "state" there is referring to the nation, the individual nations of 13 colonies that they thought of as nations, if you will. You read the Declaration of Independence, the very last paragraph made it very clear that we're referring to themselves as sovereign nations. And to secure that freedom required the people to be armed. I'm disappointed because I believe that the President has overstepped his authority. I know at least one other state has already talked about legal actions to address this executive order. I don't know what we can do as a county commission. This is really not county commission business, but I am certainly impacted personally by this. It bothers me greatly. I think we need to do whatever we can as a county commission to let our wishes be known. And I would entertain potentially a legislative agenda item on our platform to encourage the state legislature to do a resolution encouraging Congress to, in fact, repeal this executive order with whatever action they can take. It has been done by some presidents. They have repealed executive orders of prior presidents. So whether it be legal action or an action of Congress or an action of the next president, I would like to see this amendment of this executive order rescinded. You know, the president talked yesterday about the children of Sandy Hook and many other shootings. He brought tears to his eye, And he said as he thinks about the children that were impacted by this violence, he was brought to tears and wishes that we could do something about it. You know, we, as a state and as a people of this country, we have a responsibility, I think, to defend ourselves first. And certainly if we take that seriously, we can certainly defend others as well. If we truly trusted the American people to be trained and to be armed, I think that we would actually see a reduction in violence in places around this world where guns have been allowed and freedom has been allowed. There's been reductions in violence. And if you look around the nation and around the world at places that have tried to restrict or to prohibit guns, the violence has gone up. These are well-substantiated correlations. And you know, I think the answer to Sandy Hook, frankly, is that we should have been prepared. I know one commissioner, previous meetings, talked about being prepared. That's exactly what we're talking about today. The county manager addressed this yesterday in our staff meeting. But we should be a prepared people. I think everybody needs to have a personal plan and to explore what can you do to defend yourself, and don't be caught off guard. We have a responsibility to be prepared. With that, you know, House Bill 2052, which was passed in 2013, called the Public Building Security Act, which is a bill that I authored with the assistance of Patricia Stoneking of the Kansas State Rifle Association. In that bill includes a provision for Kansas teachers to be armed. Now, as far as I know, no teacher in Kansas has been able to utilize that provision in that law. But should Sandy Hook happen in Kansas, I'm going to go back to that point and say we should have been prepared. There are literally dozens, if not, I don't know how many elementary schools are in the Wichita area or Sedgwick County area, but there are lots of them. There's certainly hundreds across the entire state of Kansas. Every one of them is a soft target. Every one of them is vulnerable to bad guys coming in there to do exactly what they did at Sandy Hook. And we've done nothing as a people to prepare ourselves. We have the responsibility, I think, to think ahead and to change our ways. We are obviously vulnerable, but to sit back and do nothing, I think, is the wrong answer. And I would just ask my colleagues to think about what we can do as a county commission to encourage the legislature and the governor, perhaps the attorney general, to engage this issue aggressively and to make a statement as much as we possibly can that this executive order is not a solution. In fact, as I think about the mass shootings, and I've studied most of them, this has been a topic that I'm very involved in. I read a stat last week, I believe, of 37 recent mass shootings. I say recent, like over the last year. Maybe it's even longer than that. I'm not sure what the time period is. Maybe it was 5 years. But 37 of the well-known mass shootings, only 3 times did law enforcement actually arrive on scene and fire a shot to stop the violence. The reality is these incidents happen very, very rapidly. And by the time the police can show up and do anything, it's usually over. And, you know, just a couple of minutes is all it takes for someone who's intent on doing these types of things to commit their violence. And to focus on the registration of firearms, and by the way, that's exactly what this is, the idea that we're going to somehow regulate person-to-person sales, it raises a lot of questions to me. And I look at the drone registration provisions that were just implemented a few weeks ago. There's relatively low cost to register and very, very high penalties for not registering. I see that as a model for what they're going to do with firearm registration. When you give or sell a firearm to another person, you do not have to be a firearms dealer. You're allowed to do that. I have sold firearms before to other people, and sometimes to my own family. Sometimes I've given firearms to my own family because I'm their father and I think they ought to have firearms. You know, I own firearms, and I think anybody who's serious about their defense ought to be able to have firearms and know how to use them and be prepared to use them if necessary. But what the president's getting to is he calls it, quote, the gun show loophole. There's no such thing as a gun show loophole, in my opinion. It's been mischaracterized. What this actually is person-to-person sales. The only way to actually accomplish his goals is to actually have a national registration database. And that, in my opinion, is a first step towards confiscation. Right now, we do not have a national database on firearms, and it should remain that way for us to remain a free state. It says here, they shall not be the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. I think when the government keeps track of who has firearms and regulates and mandates that the transfer of these firearms must be controlled by the government, then we are less free people, and we are vulnerable to a government that I don't trust. So I guess I'm very, very, very concerned that the president has chosen to do something that has no bearing whatsoever on what his stated goals are. He wants to reduce gun violence. What he chose to do yesterday is completely ineffective at accomplishing his goals. Most gun violence is done by stolen firearms. It is not done through people who buy firearms legally. Most guns that are sold are done through places like Gander Mountain and Walmart and other sporting goods stores. And those that are sold at the gun show tables are dealers that do background checks currently. So this idea there's a gun show loophole is just a misunderstanding exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about private transfers of firearms from person to person. And so I guess I'm just very concerned about what this means. It is a significant change. It was, in my opinion, unconstitutional.
Production and broadcast costs for Sedgwick County Commission meetings have been underwritten by Sedgwick County.